You ready, Councilwoman? Yeah? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Just want to call the meeting to order for the Oxnard Community Services, Public Safety, Housing, and Economic Development Committee for January 13th, 2026. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call and posting of the agenda, please?
Committee Member Perallo? Here. Committee Member Bettis?
Here.
Chair MacArthur?
Here.
The agenda for this meeting was posted in the kiosk at City Hall, the Oxnard Public Library, the city administrative offices, and on the city's website on Tuesday, January 6, 2026. Thank you.
Wonderful. If I can just have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. You want to say something about that?
Mayor, I did want to ask if we can take a moment of silence for Renee Good, who was shot and killed by ICE in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Certainly. We'll also take a moment of silence for our Oxnard Police Commander, Scott Aaron, who tragically passed away while away at a training in Orange County. I had the absolute privilege of working alongside of him, and he's just an absolute great human being, and is such a loss for our community. He was one of those officers that, full of integrity and ethics, and really transcended our cultural language barriers, always focused on providing the best service to our community. So it's a tremendous loss for our police department, and our prayers and thoughts are with his family. Thank you, Mr. Perallo. He leaves behind 2 kids and a wife, and he's also a former Marine as well. So we'll take a moment of silence for him as well. Thank you. You can repeat after me. Ready? Begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to make a quick announcement as well. With everyone's okay, I'm going to move item D2 to go first. Item D2 is the Teatros de las Americas item, and we will move D1 to D2, just for consideration of the amount of people that are here to speak, okay? And the first item on the agenda is public comments for items not on the agenda. A person at this time may come up. You have 3 minutes to speak if you want to speak on items not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers for this item? Thank you. Dana, if you're in the audience, come up. Yeah, sorry, come on up. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, sir. I just want to acknowledge all the work you've done by the library. The plants look fantastic. The trash in the streets better, the graffiti's better. And I feel safe in my hometown. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those nice comments.
Thank you for those words.
Yeah, that means a lot. Thank you. Any other public speakers in person or virtual on this item?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any additional speakers for items not on the agenda in person or virtually. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item is the consent agenda, and the only item I see here is the approval of the minutes of the October 28th and November 25th and December 9th, 2025 Community Services, Public Safety, Housing, and Development Committee meeting. Do any members have any questions or comments?
I do not.
Thank you. No comments.
If there's no change, no comments, no public speakers, I'd move the recommended action.
And confirming no public speakers on the consent agenda?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any public speakers on the information and consent agenda in person or virtually. Thank you.
I'll second the motion, Mayor.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Committee Member Bettis?
Yes.
Committee Member Perallo?
Yes.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes.
And this motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, this is from the Housing Department. Originally, was item D2 on your agenda. Now it's D1. This subject entails lease agreement with Teatro de las Americas. The recommendations that the Community Services, Public Safety, and Housing and Development Committee recommend that the City Council, one, authorize the mayor to execute a lease agreement with Teatro de las Americas for the use of property owned by the City of Oxnard located at 321 West 6th Street for a term of 3 years with 2 one-year options to extend the agreement at the discretion of the city manager for a total of 5 years at an annual fee of $1 and quarterly rent up to $2,970 of their quarterly gross revenues in excess of $10,560. And two, authorize the mayor to forgive past due rent to the city of Oxnard in the amount of $15,690 for the past due rent through January 2026, plus a daily rata share through February 2026. And I see that our director from the Housing Authority is here, Brenda Lopez. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this item? I imagine we do. Thank you. And if it's okay with this committee, we'll proceed with the speakers first. James Dunlin, followed by Anna Van Hoven, and then Juan Gonzalez.
Good evening. My name is James Donlin. I have a long history in Oxnard. I was born in Oxnard in 1947. The Pettit House in Heritage Square was actually the house where my father grew up, and my great uncle lived there until he died. And my father built the first slips at Channel Islands Marina. So I have a long, long history in this city. I wanted to advocate for the Teatro de las Americas. Being a professional actor and director for 55 years, also a professor at UCSB, I know that the arts are so important to a cultural region. And Teatro de las Americas is the only Spanish language emphasized theater between Salinas and LA. In Salinas, we have the famous Teatro Campesino. Luis Valdez, who founded that theater, was an advocate for Cesar Chavez, who I know lived in Oxnard for a while. And I just wanted to tell you that how important this theater is to the city, especially since the city has now been, that area has been designated by the state as a cultural district in Oxnard, one of the few. I think there's only 10 or 15 in the whole state. So that theater is a jewel, offering programs for kids, adults. It has the only national short film festival of Spanish language short films in the country, which is pretty phenomenal. So I think, any culture is defined by its arts, among other things, and it harkens to intelligence and creativity. And it's just wonderful, I think, that this kind of theater is here, and I would advocate that it has a space that it can work in and grow and flourish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlin. Thank you. We'll now go to Anna. Anna, you'll be followed by Mr. Juan Gonzalez.
Good evening, members of the committee. I am Anna Van Hoven. I am the Executive Director of Teatro de las Americas, and I wrote a little speech for you. So for more than 30 years, Teatro has been a beacon for the Latino community in Oxnard, a place where our stories, our language, and our families are honored on stage. We are one of the few bilingual theaters on the Central Coast and the only one in Oxnard dedicated to uplifting the voices and experiences of our community. When people walk into Teatro, they feel it immediately. This is home for us. Teatro is more than a theater. It is a cultural home where generations come together, grandparents, parents, and children to share in storytelling, creativity, and connection. In a city where the majority of residents identify as Latino, having a space that reflects our heritage and celebrates our identity is not optional, it is essential. And just as importantly, Teatro is a place for the future kids of Oxnard. Young people who step onto our stage gain confidence, leadership, and a sense of belonging that stays with them for life. They learn to use their voice, to take up space, and to see themselves as part of the cultural fabric in this city. Many of our youth performers go on to college, to careers in the arts, and to civic leadership because they first found their voice at Teatro. As Oxnard moves towards its new cultural district designation, Teatro stands as one of the places where the city's cultural identity is most visible. When the committee toured downtown, you began your journey with us, and that wasn't accidental. Teatro is where the languages, stories, and families of Oxnard come together. We reflect the spirit of this city, and we help shape how it is seen and celebrated. The lease before you tonight is not just a financial decision. It is an investment in equity in youth, and in downtown revitalization, and in the cultural future of Oxnard. It gives us the stability to continue rebuilding after the setbacks that we've had, and it ensures that the city retains a dedicated art space that is accessible, bilingual, and rooted in the community it serves. We are deeply grateful for the city's partnership and for the staff recommendations supporting this lease. With your approval, Teatro de las Americas will continue to be a home for creativity, culture, and community for many years to come. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to the arts and to the families of Oxnard. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Juan Gonzalez?
Thank you, Your Honor, distinguished members of the committee and the City Council. My name is Juan Gonzalez. I'm the president of the Board of Teatro de las Americas. Have been involved with Teatro since 1993. I fell in love with what they were doing, the productions that they were offering to the city of Oxnard, all mostly in Spanish. And then they started giving classes to kids. And we have Alina here, who's a instructor of the children's theater programs that we have twice a year. I introduced my granddaughter when she was 5, and she was terrified to be left alone, so I would sit there with her. Now she's in Spain. She is a 9th grader, and she gets up and speaks in front of strangers constantly, is excelling in volleyball, excelling in school. She just left Santa Clara Elementary from here to move to Spain with her parents. But because of Teatro de las Americas, she was this shy child and just blossomed into a leader of her class. In the 6th grade, she ran against a 7th grader to be the head cheerleader, and she won. And it had a lot to do with the education, the positive exposure of being presented in front of a group of adults or just the audience. And we're here to tell you that Teatro is an amazing, amazing program. We don't charge like other local theaters, like $500 per kid. I think we're charging like $90 a kid for a summer program. But the benefit that comes out of Teatro is just amazing for the community. It's amazing for all of us who are volunteering our time. We have professionals who direct, professionals who assist with the backstage, and professional musicians have come into Teatro to record for movies that we presented this past summer. And it is a jewel of Oxnard, and I think we need Teatro de las Americas here. And I would invite all of you to come and check out our next play, which we just started rehearsing yesterday. I'm sorry that we didn't have the money to pay the rent during the last couple of years, but COVID hit us pretty hard. And it's been difficult to get grants, but we're moving forward with some grants. And at the same time, I'm responsible for also generating more funds for Teatro. So I asked all of you to be part of us and keep us here. And as the committee has presented in front of you, allow us to stay under the guidelines that were written. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. Margaret, we'll take Margaret Cortese. Margaret, you'll be followed by Barbara Ortiz.
Good evening, honorable members of this committee. Quick comment, I used to be on this committee years ago, so I'm familiar with you. I'm one of the founders of Teatro de las Americas, and I'm going to give you a quickie history. In 1991, Dana Elcar, who was at that time the director at the Santa Paula Theater Center, looked around town and said, oh, geez, we're doing this play. We should do the version in Spanish as well. And so the play ran for the usual 4 or 5 weeks, And a friend of mine, whom some of you might know, Martha Garza, invited me, oh, come on and try out for this play. And I did. I had 6 lines. It was my first time on stage since college. With time, we decided we wanted to have our own theater because they really weren't interested in doing much more in Spanish. And we look around ourselves, and there's an awful lot of Spanish speakers, both bilingual and monolingual. And I remember talking to somebody at the school district when we were trying to rent a space from the school district and said, oh, I didn't know there was theater in Spanish. Well, that just enraged me. And I thought, we're going to do this. So we started out at the airport. The school district had a little place there. We moved around. We were at Oxnard College for 2 or 3 years. We were totally mobile. We had a space in North Oxnard at where the ice skating rink used to be. And we lucked into, or I think it was Barbara actually, who tuned me into the availability of the building on 6th Street. So we moved in there. We've been there for several years. Over the years, we presented early on 2 productions a year. More recently, we've gone to 4 productions a year. And real quick, to talk about the impact on youth, we did a children's theater about, 15 years ago. And we had this little girl, Daisy, and she didn't speak much Spanish, even though her parents spoke Spanish. In fact, I think they were monolinguals. And I went over to her house with a tape recorder so that she could practice her lines. And her mother said, you know, she used to not speak to me, and now she does. And that still brings tears to my eyes, that child's family life improved. And as I used to be a psychologist, being bilingual or trilingual is an awesome way to grow up. It empowers your brain to greater capacity. So I want to see us continue, and I come to ask for your support to keep Teatro Las Americas going here in downtown Oxnard, and to come to our plays. I did one where somebody was a mayor, and I think the mayor at the time, I think it was John Zaragoza, came. Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Thank you. Ms. Barbara Macri-Ortiz.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. It's a real honor to follow Margaret. She's a legend in our community, and she really was the one that really moved theater over the years. And, you know, when we talk about money and losing money in 2025, based on what we've been going through as a community, it's no surprise, you know, nobody goes out. Nobody, it's scary going out. It's very scary going out. I know that, you know, they spent a fair amount of money, and I think that was the trade-off with the rent going into this place in terms of getting it ready and all. But the value of this organization in this community, in many respects, is priceless. Not just because of the history that it brings, but because of the continuity and the contemporary experience. You know, one of the best plays I went to was watching the 2 daughters of Jessica Arciniega perform. And as Margaret was talking about, you know, how kids develop, and just in those 2, I could see so much development over the years, and part of that is because of teatro. So I think, I know, you know, when you look at leases and all, you're looking at dollars and cents, but there has to be a value. And this is a building that wouldn't have been doing anything. You know, it kept it from being graffitied. In fact, we got a beautiful mural out there. And it's part of the community, and people know it and appreciate it. And we've got to keep it going. I mean, with all these attacks on our community, we really do need to support our community. And this is one way that you can literally be supporting the youth and the Latino community. So I urge you to pass the recommended item, and I thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers in person?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, that concludes our speakers on this item, both in person and virtually. Thank you.
Thank you. Any committee members have any questions of staff on this particular item? Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Yeah, maybe we can go ahead and, I know they shared a little bit about that the programs offered are no cost. And curious, perhaps maybe a question for the team there. I know as we know right now, there's a lot of fear in the community, and just curious what we're doing to kind of support families and young people right now to perhaps participate or come in person for a lot of the programming opportunities that you provide. It's definitely a believer that young people deserve opportunity.
Thank you. Good evening, Brenda Lopez, Director for the Housing Department. I'm going to invite Teatro's President, Juan Gonzalez, to come back up and just touch on that.
Yep.
Mr. Gonzalez?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat that, please?
Considering all the fear that's happening right now in the community, and this being a really great opportunity for young people to have a sense of community and to also get that exposure to opportunity, just curious how you're perhaps navigating bringing folks in despite the fear to still participate in the programming that you all offer.
Where do we stand? We are a theater company, and we invite different opinions, and we obviously are not happy with what's happening in this country. I don't recognize my country anymore. It hurts me dearly, and I feel that the people that do get to participate in teatro feel like they're at a haven, they're a sanctuary. Once we go in there, we're in a different world, right? It allows us to create, to act, to show, to present. And luckily, ICE hasn't walked into our theater company. But I think it's another positive avenue for those who fear what's going on in our life today.
Thank you. If I can just go really brief, I'm certainly committed to supporting the arts. I think that they, for all the right reasons that everyone here, from Mr. Dunlin, Anna, you, Juan, and Margaret, and Barbara indicated, I think they boost creativity, personal growth, not only for the individuals, but I think for the audience. And I think it brings social cohesion. It strengthens the bonds between one another. And I think Barbara mentioned it, and I recognize that our downtown is suffering. So I think you're adding a lot of value, not only with the arts, but also helping us as a city by ensuring that that area is protected, that we uplift that area, that you're providing, just by staffing it, security essentially, lowering graffiti. But the more important thing is providing an opportunity for young people to go in there and engage in the theater and the arts. I think that is a tremendous benefit to us, and and I recognize it for what it is. So thank you for all that you do. Absolutely. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the speakers that spoke. I have some viewpoints, but some comments were made, and I want to address those right off the bat. It was mentioned that past Mayor Zaragoza was in the building. I went to theaters with my wife to that facility. I sat in that theater with Carmen Ramirez in that facility. So, and I'm not Latino. The other part is, this is not only dollars and cents. The issue that I personally feel that was when I first read this, I look in the audience and I see a few people with gray hair. I see some people that say they've got some real deep roots in this community. They know that there are things that have happened in the past that have not been good for this community with respect to dollars and cents. And on this particular item, I have a viewpoint that is a little different, actually quite a bit different than what the staff report is. I'm accused often that I'm speaking a little too blunt, but I'm speaking from my feeling. This is how I operate. I believe the public has a perception of what the term gift, subsidy, and charity mean. Now, if we look it up We may not agree with what the definitions are in a book or a dictionary or in artificial intelligence. But on this particular thing, when the entity is having problems getting by, and I know from a very personal close friend that there have been opportunities to fundraise. And when I hear about that, I hear and I think to myself, sponsorships, and if we can't make the rent, and the rent, $990, that's a lot of money. But technically, that's what the rent was decided, that's what was agreed on. The suggestion that I have is not that rent. But my views are simply this. Forget that it has a Latino community in the city of Oxnard. Forget that it is a Latino theater, that their claim is that they hope to be the most prominent one on the Central Coast, and that it was identified from Salinas to Los Angeles. That is a big deal. But it is hard to believe for me, as a resident in this area since 1958, that we don't have prominent people and less than prominent people that are willing to put a little money into this facility versus asking the taxpayers to do that. My belief is, forgetting whatever the makeup of the community, whatever the makeup of this theater, if there is an opportunity for somebody to get something for free, and I will use the example, there are normally 7 of us here, there's only 3 today. If I get something free, the 2 other council members, the mayor and the council member next to me should get the same thing. If one of them gets something free, I and the other member up here should get the same thing. If we gift, and that's where I bring up the subject, gift, subsidy, and charity. If we gift something of public funds, where do we draw the line? And I don't want to bring up other issues because I know that I can see, I count more than 6 people with gray hair, some white, almost like me. And if you've been around, you're aware of some real bad things that have happened in the city with respect to decisions financial that have cost the city a lot of money and are still costing the city a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of money. So when I saw we're going to have $1 a year, it bothered me quite a bit. I propose we go for $300 a month for the first year in rent. The second year, $600 a month. The third year, $900 a month. And that is the term of this lease with 2 extensions of a year each. I appreciate everything that has been said about this facility. There are some very bad things that have happened in that general area, and this is one of the shining stars in that block. One of the shining stars in that block. Some real bad stuff has happened there. Vandalism, and just recently, it was informed, and I appreciate Ms. Perez and Ms. Golden explaining things to me about which I did not know. A recent fire did damage, $2,000 worth of damage. Money goes through a sieve extremely fast in the city because of real costs. And those real costs are paid for by the city of Oxnard. Whether they go to the facility, whether they're Latino, whether they're young, old timers, or newcomers, they all pay. The cultural aspect is a big deal, a real big deal. The recent identification of the area as a national thing is a tremendously big deal. I don't want this to go away, but there needs to be a way that we don't have somebody else coming up, say Bert's Hobby Horse Shop, and I want to get a building for free, $1 a year. How come we give it to one person, we don't give it to me? Or Bert's Go-Kart Track, and I want to give it for $1 a year, and we have an example that we gave somebody. How do we pick winners and losers? Ladies and gentlemen, that's how I see it. How do we pick winners and losers with the public's money? My proposal is that for the first year, the rent is $300, not the $990 that it was, or not the $1 that is the proposal. The second year, it's double. And the next year after that, it's up to the $900. I hope there's support on this council. I intend to, even if there is not, I intend to continue to advocate for this at the city council level. The issue of gift, subsidy, charity, I believe this is a subsidy. a needed subsidy for the arts. But I don't believe in the gift. I believe that the deal of charity, I don't believe it's charity. I believe it's a business decision if we wipe away the old debt. Businesses wipe away the old debts often, every year. But I am aware of professional people in this city that have residents in the city, work outside of the city, that have made offers in the past to make donations to nonprofits. They've only asked for one thing, a receipt so they can use it on their taxes. I'm aware of people that make donations, some substantial contributions, some big corporations in this community. I'm surprised that there has not been, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm as guilty as anyone else. I didn't make any outreach to hustle money for your organization. But there should be something in the city working with somebody that can figure out where can we hustle funds from people that are looking, that want to do good things. But when somebody has limited resources, they can only help a little bit. They can put a lot of sweat equity, but financial is a little bit. When somebody has a lot of financial resources, they can help quite a bit. But they usually have an expectation that they will be given something and treated professionally, a simple tax receipt, so they can use in their taxes. I do not want to see this go away. And it's not that I don't want to see it go away because it's a Latino favorite. That is not it. It's something that has been there a long time. I remember having a good time in that meeting. It was, Mrs. Cortez, it was an English and a Spanish one. My wife could speak Spanish, so she had to tell me the Spanish, but the English, I got it. But I remember that. And with Carmen used to kid me, you better learn the language, Perolo, if you're going to be in Oxnard much longer. It's a good thing, but that's my proposal. And,
May I address your proposal?
And I just want to state that my proposal is in the form of a motion. Go ahead.
Got it, thank you.
Regarding fundraising, we have actively been involved with that. Last year, I offered my house, to show a play in the house, the kitchen and the living room were the actual stage. We generated $6,000 from ticket sales at the house. My law firm donates money every year to the theater company. I've asked doctors whom we do business with through the law firm to donate money to the theater. And I appreciate your proposal. If I may ask you, Mr. Perello, to cap it at $600. This past year, we were close to shutting down because we got down to $3,000 in our account. We have received some grants from the Port of Wainimi, and with Anna coming on board, she's been extremely instrumental in getting other grants for us. And if we can come back in 3 years, and if we do have more grants or more funds, I would gladly say that we can pay the $900. But I don't want to come back 3 years from now and ask for another discount or waiver of fees that we can pay. And I understand your position. I understand if you give something to us, someone else is going to ask for the same thing. I get that.
I'm asking for that specific motion that I made because I'm not asking for a percentage of your profits when you become profitable. I'm not asking for that. And with you asking it to go to $600, you seem to forget about that.
Well, it's just that we've never been profit. We have never shown a profit in 20-something years. I don't think any theater company, even the Rubicon, but for the millions of dollars that they just received, they were going to file for bankruptcy a couple of years ago. So we're not in it for the profit. We're here to give back to the community.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Okay?
I understand that.
yeah.
Thank
So I'm not sure if I can negotiate, but maybe you can take that into consideration.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, can you, just for clarity, the council member's motion?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, Committee Member Perallo indicated that it would be $300 a month for the first year. The second year, it would be $600 a month, and the third year would go up to $900 a month.
Any comments before call for the vote on that, and then we can have a discussion? Yeah. Is there a second? Any? No. So seeing there's no second, the motion dies. What I will say is, and maybe we can have the director come up and maybe elucidate further on the staff's recommendation. I think local government is, we're in the business of making money. There's times that we need to subsidize right, yes, go ahead, Mr. Pearl.
We're not in the local government, just for the general public out here. Local government is not the private sector. Local government is not in the business of making money. That's just
Correct.
got to be corrected.
That's correct. And so there's times, in my opinion, where we need to offer these services for the greater good of a community to support the arts, and recognizing that this is an entirely volunteer effort. And I see personally positivity in the visual blight that an unoccupied building presents to a city, and then the incurred expenses and providing security to monitor. And it, for me personally, if it's occupied, then that's a benefit for us. And there's, from what I see here, there's a built-in, I know Mr. Gonzalez mentioned that they're never been profitable, but should they become profitable, there's a built-in, essentially, contribution back to the city. Those are just my comments, Councilwoman.
Yeah, I just have one comment, and this is really a comment that I think our housing director could help clarify. In just looking at the agenda here on page 50, kind of highlights how the number was calculated. It says the gross revenue figure was calculated based on the average gross annual revenue of Teatro's most profitable years in 2022 and 2024. I think if you can kind of share more for the public on how the number was come up with, and any other kind of insight that was considered when calculating the numbers and finalizing that.
Sure, thank you. Brenda Lopez again. I'm Director for the Housing Department, and that is correct. So we are building in a clause into the agreement stating that we are confident that Teatro is going to be able to increase our profit. And when that time comes, then what we're proposing is that when we review their quarterly revenue, if they get to this figure, and I'll go back and I'll explain how we derived it, that they will be responsible for paying rent in the amount of $9.90 per month. So in this case, I do want to clarify, when we looked at gross revenues, please keep in mind we looked at gross revenue versus net income. So what we did is we independently asked for a copy of Teatro's 990s. For 2022, they reported gross revenues in the amount of $41,246. At the time that we prepared the staff report, we also had the 2024 profit and loss, which showed gross revenues in the amount of $43,243. Since those were the two years where they showed the most revenue, if you will, we added them together, totals $84,489 divided by 2 years, and that comes out to $42,244. So then from there, we said divided by 12. So on a monthly basis, it would come out to approximately $3,520. So our proposal is that if in a given quarter, they net out $10,560, so that's the 3520 times 3, we're proposing that then Teatro will be responsible for paying the rent of $990 per month. So that's, and it goes into a lot of detail, but we basically said if they're generating this revenue in that quarterly period, then they will be paying rent.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez, I see from the staff report how you calculated to the potential future rental revenue loss. But I also see that the city would experience cost savings for the building maintenance expenses. Do we have just an estimated number on some of the cost savings we would see for the maintenance because it's being occupied and being cared for by the occupant?
For the cost savings, that's difficult to quantify because it could be if somebody vandalizes the property, then we need to respond, whether it's our police department, whether it's our fire department, and also staff that need to come in and board up the windows if necessary, or if there's trespassing, there could be security expenses. It really depends. When we don't have our buildings occupied, we are exposed to more liability. So on our end, when we look at this request, of course, we value the services that are provided, but we also try, not that we try, we have a responsibility to look at the financial aspect and what does that mean to the city. And so in this case, if we were to not negotiate and Teatro were to vacate the building, we will have a vacant building, which again, not only are we dealing with the security, ongoing maintenance, but then if we were to demolish, we would need to have that funding available as well. In the staff report, we do mention that we're looking at long-term redevelopment of the area. And that's important to keep in mind because when we pursue lease agreements for commercial buildings, there are requesting long-term. And right now, we are not in the position to enter into an agreement for a long-term. So we also got to keep that in mind on how much appeal is there for this vacant property. So on our end, we're looking from the perspective of continuing to serve the community, but also from the city's goals, we're looking at redevelopment. So how do we use the space as much as possible? Teatro is responsible for maintaining, and if there's any major improvements needed to the building, they will need to undertake that expense. So that's also important that it limits how much financial, responsibility we have.
And Mayor, if I may, I think some of the public comments that were made tonight have alluded to some of the maintenance that has been done. I know there's a mural there. I think somebody referenced graffiti abatement. If there are any other maintenance that has been done for the building thus far, I'm happy to kind of learn more about that too.
Sure, Mr. Gonzalez will come up to provide more detail.
We spent $63,000 or so to renovate that, to get all the lights, to get a functioning theater up and running. The two large expenses that we had in the last couple of years was plumbing, $7,000 for the plumbing, and close to $9,000. And then we just added a air conditioning system, and that was about $700. $7,000. I'm sorry. And any major repairs, painting, and we all volunteer. Yeah. We get up, we paint, we sweep, we do the things that we can't do, that we have to hire, we have to pay for. So we take care of our place, or your place.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
I think it was over for me that is pretty normal within a lease, though. And in the beginning, when they came in, they got a $35,000 credit for a tenant improvement. And Brenda can speak to that much more about when we set up leases. When things are specific to the use that is there, that is often on the tenant, and that's how it works in the private as well. But there was a rent credit for that very first time. But this is very unusual that the staff is going to come forward with a recommendation to waive rent, back rent, and also to come forward with $1 a year. And I really respect Councilman Perello's position on this, living through budget cuts here and living through trying to reduce all of our subsidies. And I think that was a really good distinction between a gift and a subsidy and a business decision, and just kind of putting them into those buckets. And if not for this very specific block that we're talking about here, where we have future redevelopment plans, and we have had a lot of vandalism, demoing one of our previous buildings there, costing us over $150,000. So setting aside the value that this individual theater provides for our community, if you take that out of the whole discussion, even if it was a different use in there, the furniture store that used to be in there, there is still value for not having a vacant building in this specific block. We are a majority owner of the block. We have plans for redevelopment. The council has already made a decision to surplus those properties for redevelopment. So I don't want to put too much on it's because it's Teatro, and Teatro was great. They have been a great tenant there. They've been a great tenant, and the community throughout, as you heard Margaret speak, they've been throughout the community. They haven't been just here. They've always provided the service. The staff's recommendation, despite the value of the art, which it is, and we co-signed for that DOYA designation for culture, we value that, but this is really about the block and the business and supporting that in the short term while we implement the city's council priorities for redevelopment of downtown. And that's what we're really looking for here. Councilman Perello raised the idea of a tiered rent system. That's pretty common as well. It's a little bit easier to implement than what we're what we're recommending, because you're having to look at profit and losses. I heard Juan come with a counter to that, which I didn't hear the council debate. So I kind of feel where you guys are at this point is, Councilman Perello's motion died, obviously. There was the counter by Juan of something to discuss, or the staff recommendation, or another. But I just want to provide the context. This is staff's very specific recommendation for the block. Since that 2018 budget, we have worked on all of our lease agreements, and we have a great number of leases that we have within the city, daycares, youth centers, other things that are very valuable within this community as well. And we have increased and got those to all market rate for any new ones that have come through. So this is really unique.
Yeah, and I appreciate Councilmember Perello's remarks and comments, and they have tremendous value. But and I get it's a business decision, but not to undermine the tremendous value that the arts brings, and we're just so fortunate to have you there. I'm prepared to make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation, but I would make an adjustment, though, to see if we can get a monthly report from Mr. Gonzalez indicating the activity that is going on in the theater, the plays that are going on, and also include in their line indicating the efforts that are made to for fundraising and for grants. But I'm prepared to make the
I'll second the motion.
with that adjustment.
Okay.
But do you want to repeat the motion, Madam Clerk, just for clarity for the audience, for the public?
Chair MacArthur, I believe you made the motion to approve staff's recommendation, and that you would like to get monthly activity reports and the efforts that Teatro de las Americas is doing in terms of fundraising and other
And the activities
activity.
that they're doing, and that be shared with staff and council. Thank you. And there's a second,
Committee Member Bettis,
Yes.
Committee Member Perallo,
No.
Chair MacArthur,
yes,
and this motion carries 2-1. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, everyone. We will now move to the next item on the agenda. This is item D2 from the Housing Department. Subject, resolution establishing administrative regulations regarding the fair rate of return petition regulations to implement the city's rent stabilization ordinance. The recommendation that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing, and Development Committee review and recommend that the City Council approve the proposed resolution establishing administrative regulations to implement the provisions of the rent stabilization ordinance regarding fair rate of return petition regulation. And Director Brenda Lopez is here to answer any questions, but first, I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Ashley, who has some comments to make.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just want to thank all the stakeholders that have participated in this process. We know that it's taken some time. I know it's taken time on all sides, and we were here back in March, so a little bit longer than we expected. Tremendous lift by city staff as well. I would just like to thank the efforts and the collaboration that we've had. Within the report, we said we got to consensus. We probably should have said compromise. I think that we compromised on all sides, including the city side. There are very distinct points of view within this. We had a number of meetings with the stakeholders. I mean, in one case too, we had the stakeholders, which I will say from maybe opposing sides, actually come together and submit a joint letter. So the collaboration and the understanding and compromise on all sides, I just thought was really tremendous. And I'm just really grateful for that effort that we were able to have. So thank you for that. You did receive a letter from Barbara Macker-Ortiz yesterday requesting 7 additional changes. Those are not new to staff, and I think Barbara, if she's still in the front there, I can't see over the podium at the moment, for giving staff a heads up on that continued that collaborative process. We weren't blindsided by the letter that you received yesterday. Those are things that we talked about in our joint meetings with the various stakeholders. Just to help try to make this move through the night because there are a number of items. We went ahead and put together the points from Barbara's letter in a slide, and I'd like, if we can, maybe to have the city attorney is online with us, the assistant city attorney is online with us, to walk through what those changes are. And I just thought that might help the committee be able to listen more to the community, and also for the stakeholders that participated to feel like we're not changing position on any side, because what Barbara's going to hear tonight and what Cause is going to hear tonight and what the Realtor Group is going to hear tonight is the same thing that we talked about in our community meetings or our meetings with them, but I thought it would be beneficial for the council community here. So Diego, if you can pull up the slides.
Just really quick, just to clarify, what we're going to be reviewing is the 7 revisions.
Yeah, the requested revisions, and then we'll turn it over to the community to speak, and staff will be here to answer. But we just thought that way we're all on the same page in case the stakeholders didn't have a chance to read through all that, to just keep the discussion moving forward.
I appreciate it. Go ahead, Councilmember Perlo.
Assistant City Manager Golden, do we have representatives from all the stakeholders in the audience?
We do.
Thank you.
It's also my intent to make this a workshop-style hearing where we have active participation back and forth between staff and those members of the audience that want to participate. But we also have 3 public speakers, but we'll go to you. Ms. Golden, go ahead.
Diego, you have those slides? Ella, are you able to see those slides?
Actually, I'm actually going
Oh,
to take
you're
the
going to do
slides.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have the pointers?
I have them. No. Oh,
Diego, are you also able to check Mr. Councilmember Perello's screen? It's not coming on for some reason. Oh, there it is. There's just a loose wire, it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, council members. Elle McCarron via Zoom, Assistant City Attorney. Myself and Andrew Gonzalez, our Deputy City Attorney, went through Barbara's changes, and he's going to go ahead and walk you through these slides, and then I'll be available for any follow-up. Thank you.
hi, Andrew Gonzalez, Deputy City Attorney. So the first slide that we're looking at, there is 6 requested changes by Barbara Macri Ortiz. We're going to briefly go over these 6 just for me to read them, but so that you know the slides that follow cover them more in depth. So the first one, pages 32 and 33, there are typos specifically in section 4A. There's a typo that originally had stated subsection D that should be changed to C. For section 1.04 2A, the very word should be changed to no. It currently reads just O. On the second substantive change, page 20, requested changes, section 1.04 2B states any further reply shall be presented orally or in writing. That was the requested change by Barbara. We'll go into, in the slides that follow, what staff recommendations are for each of these requested changes. Also on page 20, section 1.04, subsection 2F, the hearing officer shall make the decision based only on the oral and written submission. Again, the red portion is what was requested by Barbara Macri Ortiz. For 3, page 25, on requested changes, section 1.06, 1, subsection A, add comparables must be units built prior to 1995. For B, section 1.07, subsection 1, granting a rent increase is mailed and served to inform. For 4, page 26, requested changes, section 1.07, subsection 4, the city to file with the city any written and served objection to the claim. On 5, page 34, requested policy, regulation 1.04.3, requesting a maximum 10% rent cap limit be established. And finally, the 6, page 39, requested policy, regulation 1.07.5, requesting for rent increase to be limited to less than or equal to 50% of the tenant's income. So I'm going to switch the slide, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth to each one of these 6. So starting at the beginning on page 32 and 33, Staff recommends the edits that were proposed by Barker, Mapre, Ortiz, specifically under Section 4, subsection A, where it reads, "are not limited to the items stated in Regulation 1.03, Section 1, subsections A through," it originally said D, it should be changed to C. For Section 1.04, subsection 2A, the very first word should be no. It currently reads just O. Moving on to 2, for page 20, staff recommends rejection of the proposed change by Barbara Macri Ortiz. Here, section 1.04, subsection 2, subsection B, any further replies shall be presented orally or in writing at the hearing. Staff's recommendation is no additional written information should be accepted at the hearing. The tenant can present anything additional through oral testimony. This keeps the hearing fair so that parties and hearing officers are not surprised with additional documents that have never been seen or had an opportunity to be reviewed and responded to. It allows the hearing officers to conduct an orderly hearing and avoid document and deadline disputes. Under B, section 1.04, subsection 2F, the hearing officer shall make their decision based only on the oral and written submissions. Staff's recommendation here is that the request not be accepted. This section contains a list of categories that the hearing officer can base their decision, and oral testimony of the owner and tenant is already included in this section. On to the next slide. Here on page 25, staff's recommendation is to reject the proposed change. Section 1.06, subsection 1A, adds comparables must be units built prior to 1995. Staff's recommendation here is limiting the comparable units to those built before 1995 is not a true reflection of fair market value. This will be rejected in any legal challenge. For section 1.07, subsection 1, granting a rent increase is mailed and served to inform. Staff's recommendation here is this request is rejected because it requires the creation and use of a legal document, here a proof of service. The purpose of the regulation is to simplify the process and not include legal technicalities that are not required but could result in nullifying final decisions, dates, creating confusion, and accidentally rendering deadlines void if a party forgets to include a proof of service. On page 26, staff recommends rejection to the proposed change. Section 1.07, subsection 4, the city to file with the city any written and served objection to the claim. Here, staff's recommendation is to request, to reject the request based on the exact same reasoning that was previously stated for the above service comment. On to the next slide. Here on page 34, staff recommends rejection of the proposed policy change, regulation 1.04.3, requesting a maximum 10% rent cap limit be established. Here, staff's recommendation under Civil Code section 1947.12 applies to a year-over-year increase for the gross rental rate for a dwelling which has a max cap of 10%. This does not apply to fair rate of return petitions, which are generally requested on a limited basis, not yearly. The requested change mischaracterizes the purpose of the rent cap in section 1947.12. Case law has held that limits on rent increases must reflect an increase that allows the unit owner a fair rate of return, which a cap will prevent. This type of increase is usually used on a one-time basis. And finally, on page 39, staff recommends rejection of proposed policy change here under regulation 1.07.5, requesting for rent increases to be limited to less than or equal to 50% of the tenants. The staff's recommendation is it's asking for evidentiary presumption that would shift the burden of proof onto the property owner to prove that the tenant is not suffering severe economic hardship. The presumption will affect the property owner's due process rights because these regulations are aimed at preventing a government taking while protecting tenants and property owners' rights.
Thank you, Andrew.
So that concludes the comments from Barbara. I forgot to make one point, I'm sorry, and then I'll turn it over to Elle if she has anything to add to that before we open it back for the council for further questions. But the draft version that you see before you was actually first submitted back to this group back in August 26th, and even at that time, we called it a final clean version. And we noted at that time that it was a compromise version to address the concerns of all party. We did get some more comments back actually from all three parties. We made further changes, and this version has been in the stakeholders' hands since October 20th. So every group has had plenty of time. We have not had another meeting. As I said, Barbara's comments are not new to us. They are things that we discussed in those prior meetings. But these stakeholders have had this version since October 20th, and we did get the comments, as I said, from Barbara, but not from Cause or the Realtor Group. Elle, was there anything you wanted to add to that before we turn it back to the council?
There was just one thing.
Yeah.
Just really quick, sorry, Elle, to clarify before I forget, just so everyone's aware, there's one other, just something to point out. Under the amortization, so here, if everyone will look on page 36, there are some years that they appear to be missing, but they're not. I just wanted to point out.
Excuse me, which page are you looking at?
So if you can go to 36. 36.
Is that
And-
Exhibit D?
Yes, for Exhibit D, page 36, at the very bottom, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. You'll notice that it states glass, but it appears that there's no date there or no number.
Yeah.
The reason is for formatting issues. So it really should be glass slightly to the left, glass windows, glass doors, glass mirrors, glass insulation. And that happens throughout the amortization. So that's another thing that Ms. Macro Ortiz had brought up for us to correct. We just wanted to point out it really is formatting. There's not anything missing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Elle, did you want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just two quick points. I wanted to just briefly touch on the Civil Code section that is cited in the slide. I believe it's 1947.12. That's actually the state code that creates rent stabilization. And inside and within that code, it differentiates properties that fall under rent stabilization based on whether or not they are pre-1995 or post-1995. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fair rate of petition process, which is a judicial created due process protection for property owners. So limiting the amount of a potential increase on a fair rate of return petition at 10% would most likely violate the property owner's due process rights. And we would then be linking it directly to rent stabilization, which is not appropriate. So in these instances, in order to further protect the tenant, we do have a severe economic hardship process that they can go through afterwards. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear to the committee. And lastly, in terms of the proof of service, these regulations, you'll see that there's 13 pages and there's a lot of different things that are going on. And if we are requiring the property owner or the hearing officer in only limited instances to include a proof of service, when we have the tenants not having to do a proof of service, then our regulations are looking inconsistent. And it would be really unfair if we had to make these consistent and have tenants also filing proofs of service. So we are just going by with the easiest option, which is they mail it and it's the date of mailing or the date on the document, and that triggers the deadline so that we are cutting down on disputes and we can have this process move in an efficient manner. So if there's any other questions, myself or Andrew or Ashley are available.
Thank you. Councilman Perla, go ahead.
Just for the public and anyone watching, define legally what proof of service means, and is there a cost involved with proof of service?
It's essentially a legal document that is used in judicial proceedings, and it has very specific requirements that are stated in state codes as to how the document is served. And normally it must be served by a person who is not a party to the action. So you would have property owners and tenants, if they all had to do proofs of service, they would have to find somebody that's not a property to this action. I'm sorry, a party to the action, signing this for them and actually physically taking it to the post office. And then there's a very specific language that you need to include in proofs of service, whether or not you're emailing it, mailing it, sending it via FedEx, and under what state laws, and it has to be signed under penalty of perjury. So it's a pretty technical document, and I think it'll be something that'll be very difficult for lay people to comply with each and every time. We don't have a form for that. It would be difficult to develop, and then probably even difficult for them to use. And if they do forget it and it's required in here, it creates a statutory or a regulatory mess, because then we don't have any firm deadlines, and that does not benefit the tenants at all, because they need to know what their rent is going to be and when it's going to start and when the process begins and ends.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we get into discussion, we'll take public speakers. We've got Jeanette, if you want to come up, followed by Dawn and Ms. Barbara Mackey Ortiz. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers online? No, okay. Hi.
It's so nice to see you all not on Zoom. I'm Janet Sprisler. I'm the broker owner of Rent 805. Before we even start, I just have to say it's the first time I've seen the building across the street. Great job. It's phenomenal. Really fantastic. So good evening. Again, I'm Janet Sprisler with Rent 805. I'm a housing provider and property manager here in Oxnard. And I want to speak to the fair rate of return, CPI, and the framework that this ordinance was built on. A fair rate of return is not about profits. It's about viability. It ensures housing providers can continue to operate safe, compliant, and well-maintained housing. The challenge with capping CPI at 10% is straightforward. The cost required to keep housing up to code is not capped. Construction costs are not capped, insurance is not capped, labor is not capped, and permits and compliance costs are not capped. Yet CPI, the one mechanism that allows owners to keep pace with these increases, is artificially limited. That imbalance undermines fair rate of return and ultimately impacts housing quality. This ordinance was not rushed at all. For months, housing providers, tenant advocates, and staff worked collaboratively, often for many hours. It was a lot of hours to develop a fair and equitable policy. Both sides compromised. It was a really great working atmosphere. It really was. The ordinance before you reflects that work and was intended to be workable and balanced. Introducing new structural concerns at the final stage. After that collaborative process, risks undoing the very progress that allowed this ordinance to be ready for adoption. I also want to address the issue of comparisons and base year, but I think you've taken care of that because it is 1995 and it's a state reality. So with that, this ordinance reflects balance, collaboration, and real-world conditions. I respectfully urge the council to preserve the agreed-upon framework, allow CPI to function as intended, and move forward with adoption as drafted. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you. Dawn?
Hello, good evening. I had a whole thing written to the points the staff just made. So I am here, my name is Dawn Durazo, and I am representing the Ventura County Coastal Association of Realtors. And I want to first acknowledge staff for a well-managed and collaborative process, in particular Elba, for her responsiveness and her leadership in this thing. It is great to be a part of the collaboration and approach and the opportunity to put our input in, because this kind of engagement tends to produce better policies with fewer unintended consequences, which is something I think we all want. With that being said, it's going to be quick. As written, the Fair Rate of Return petition reflects a balanced approach that considers both the tenant protections and the operational realities of providing rental housing. The Fair Rate of Return gives people the opportunity to, I'm sorry, I'm skipping all over because I don't want to say what you guys just said. It gives opportunities to a landlord to landlords must demonstrate that they are not meeting the net operating income, and they've fallen below the inflated adjustable rate base year. They can't make that that up. So if they don't show that, the petition is denied. And this is not a guarantee of profits. It's not bypassing rent caps. It is a corrective mechanism designed to address real financial imbalance. There was a article in the Ventura County Star a couple days ago, and they were, Dreyer Sheen Group stated that projects have been halted and the construction's been put on hold because the cost of the construction is rising much faster than the anticipated rates. So we really need to protect and support our current rental supply. And this is an avenue to recognize that the long-term stability is based on making sure that our rental market is taken care of. So as written, the association supports the petition and respectfully asks that the committee move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Razzo. Barbara? Thank you.
Okay, Barbara Macri Ortiz here, Mayor. And I do want to applaud and thank Alba. She did a great job. And there was a lot of collaboration, and for the most part, I think, it was, I guess, a lot of times I get a memo saying there's a consensus on this, and I'm going, what? I didn't even get to talk about that. So there was like, the lawyer kept over here for a certain amount, and then you dealt with everybody else. And I think that was part of the problem at the beginning, because then it's like, then I kind of had to pull people back. But in reading this, I mean, I have to read it as a lawyer, okay? Because that's what I am. And I have to read it in thinking about legal principles. And also in terms of reality. I did prepare for the first fair rate of return hearing that we supposedly were going to have, and the guy pulled the rug right under. And I guess you can thank me for why there's a provision about if they leave at the end, that there'll be a charge. But I think I really boiled it down to a couple of policy things, and I've been trying and asking, would somebody please explain this to me, because it doesn't make sense. Because the problem I'm having is 2025, this is your base year, and then we're gonna add all this stuff to the base year, and then it's gonna be, gotta be 100%. And then you talk about the cost of living, or CPI. I looked at just that from 22 to 25, it went up 18.1% or 18.2, something like that percent. Our 4% increases 4 years would be 16. So there's like a lag of 2% there. So I'm thinking, well, if I'm a landlord, eventually I'm just going to start going in because I can catch up. What you intended to do with rent control, we wipe it out. That's my concern. That's my concern. And I'm very concerned now because what's going on in the country, I think our inflation is going to start, keep going up. And so that's why I'm trying to protect the integrity of the ordinance over time. Maybe if you say, okay, let's see how it works, and then we'll revisit it if it doesn't give us what we want. But the people in the meantime, they pay. With respect to, I think that there wasn't a good understanding of what I was trying to do with the hardship appeal. I was trying to expedite things because the standard is you are extremely rent burdened, overpaying if you are paying 50% or more of your wages for rent. And so all I was saying is that if someone is doing a hardship appeal because they can't afford it, and they want, them to prove the hardship, I'm saying, hey, if someone's paying over 50% of their income for rent, and low income person paying more than 50% of their income for rent, they are, that is a great rent burden. And so you could say, okay, there's a rent burden. Why, have them drag in all the receipts from everything that they have had to pay and not been able to pay? That's all I was saying. Let's make it a little bit more, that's a standard. The state of California said it, the federal government said it, everybody knows it. When I started doing housing, the standard was 25% of your income for rent. That was the standard. And then it went up to 30. And then they say, well, maybe 35. And now, in some circumstances, you can even get your federal going up to 40%. Okay? So, I mean, we keep pushing, but we're pushing on the people. It's like, you've only got so much money. Once you get 50, 60% of your money going to rent, it's a given that you're not going to be able to pay all your bills. It's a given. So why do we, want to burden everybody to go ahead and show that? I mean, it just isn't enough money in the day. So I was trying to make it a little bit easier on these. I think it was kind of misunderstood. Also, I wasn't trying to set up a proof of service formula. The reason I put the serve there is because the language did not clearly say that the tenant would receive the notice. Okay, that's all. It's like,
Barbara, can I interrupt? I think we have Councilman Perello.
who's it going to?
Yeah, no, we're workshopping it, so we're not abiding by the 3 minutes. Did you have a comment, Councilmember? No.
Mayor, if I may.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody got a special.
And Barbara, maybe we'll go to you, Councilwoman. What I was thinking, if you're okay with it, Barbara, if we can, I know there's 6 points here, and I know cause is back there as well, and staff is here. If you're comfortable, we can go down the numbers and have a discussion with some response from staff. Because it seems like the first one, staff recommends the edits that you propose, so I think we're okay with that. That includes pages 32 and 33, which included some typos. So if you're okay with that, we can go to number 2, which is on page 20, where staff recommends rejection of the proposed change on sections 1.04, 2B. The staff's recommendations, as Andrew highlighted, is no additional written information should be accepted at the hearing. The tenant can present anything additional through oral testimony. This keeps the hearing fair so that parties and hearing officers are not surprised with additional documents that have never been seen or had an opportunity to be reviewed and responded to. Allows the hearing officer to conduct an orderly hearing and avoid document and deadline disputes. We can have a discussion about that. Are you in opposition to that rejection?
Well,
And Jeanette, you want to come up as well? We can.
No, I was wondering, can you just put it up on the screen so we can all see all the words?
Absolutely. Diego, is that something you
are
can
there
do?
any other speakers?
No, you were the last one.
Oh, okay.
And this is a workshop style, so we
Yeah,
can
okay.
we come up and
Yeah.
staff can. And
Yeah, I just envision that people coming into the hearing may want to present what they have in writing as opposed to the other. Now, that one, I can go along with that. I think, I really think the tenants are tied behind their backs. Having done one of these, coming in late and seeing all the stuff, it's not easy. There is a ton of stuff to have to go through. So you have to analyze it, you have to do all this stuff. Whether there's going to be time to do that within the 30 days, it depends on what we get and the form you get it in, and when the lawyer gets hired, right? I mean, if I come in on day 1, then I can handle it. But, I think I had like about a week to get ready for this hearing that had a stack of stuff, right? So I'm coming at it from that. But that's not the biggest, that's not the biggest concern.
so are we okay then moving?
something they're concerned with.
So are we okay with number 2, Barbara? Then can we go to number, if you're okay with the staff's recommendation on that particular item, are you okay moving on to number 3, which is, oh yeah, go ahead.
Of course, the only thing is going to be, in terms of due process thing, how much time. If they're going to go into a hearing, they're going to limit the person presenting to, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, then, I don't know what you can, in those situations, then you want to put it in writing because you can't speak it. That's why I gave you a letter. I didn't come up here because I knew, okay, I got 3 minutes. These are the main points, but I think really for you, I really think it's a policy thing. And I don't know. I've done enough constitutional law to know that takings is not an easy thing to get. And so I just feel like for whatever reason, they want to protect the city, fine, but they're overreacting in terms of that.
Andrew, do you have anything you can say in response to that?
Yeah, so here, we've gone over this in our meetings beforehand, but really here, the crux of, this entire, regulation that we put together is to prevent any kind of takings. This fair rate of return petition is specifically so that the landlord can show, what it is that they need to move forward with so that they're whole, so that the city is not, on the hook for a takings. So here, with that in mind, that's why we drafted this. But to Barbara's point that she just made, at the hearing, it's not like the tenant's not able to speak at all. They're able to provide information, and we articulate that inside of the regulation. It's just what we're trying to avoid is a full-blown, hearing that would be equivalent to like going to Superior Court. That's not what this is.
My question, just based off of your response there, how long do folks typically have to provide their oral statements?
There's no time limit. It would be up to, the hearing officer to end up stating, if for whatever reason it's going, too long, but we don't have an artificial, hey, you only get 5 minutes.
So the hearing officer could determine the length of time that they have. So if they wanted to request that they only speak for 3 minutes, then that could be the case.
The intent would be, though, for practicality of, timeliness, though, there's no default of you only get 5 minutes to begin with. I'd only foresee that happening if, it was going on a significant amount of time.
Yeah, and if I can jump in really quickly, this is run as an administrative hearing, which is similar to a court proceeding that does not have, the strict technical rules of evidence, civil code, and civil procedure. So they typically take an hour to a couple hours. If the ALJ feels like he needs some additional information or has to do something extra, he can take it under submission. He will provide both sides the opportunity to say everything that they want to say. And these are not necessarily complicated petitions. I think most tenants and most landlords could probably get out the information they need to the ALJ within an hour and a half. That's probably your reasonable average estimate for these. And maybe a very complicated one could be a half-day hearing of 3 to 4 hours. That's kind of what we've seen so far in these. And we want to make sure that the ALJ is available to obtain all information, oral testimony, essentially, from both sides. And he can be there to ask questions and prompt the parties. So it's not like Superior Court where they're going to walk in there and the judge is going to say, go. This judge will kind of ease them into it. He knows they're in pro per. This is something that they don't normally do, and he can prompt and direct in order to get the information he needs to make a fair decision. The last part here is we typically, in a Superior Court setting, you'll have your motion, your opposition, and a reply. So you give the person who is filing the motion, here the petition, the final word, if you will, the final written word in terms of, defending their request. So if you keep opening it up for a sur rebuttal or sur reply, if you will, from the tenant, well, then the landlord may want to reply to that in writing, and then it could just spiral out of control to a document war. So at some point, we have to choose a cutoff point, and that's in line with just about every, not, that is in line with every court, administrative tribunal, federal court. You get the three written chances. So it's petitioner or property owner, tenant, and then they get a small reply. And they don't even have to file a reply if they don't want to. So.
Thank you.
I was going to think maybe it might be helpful for Alba to kind of talk about the context and how often we see these, to know what we're kind of fighting about, if you will.
I don't think we've seen one.
No, I know we have.
But we have seen them in the mobile home
Correct.
rent review.
So my point,
yeah.
Barbara, can I just finish for a second? I mean, Barbara is an expert in this field. Nobody's going to deny that. And I think that's why we've given so much credence to what she said and worked through and done this. I mean, you're not going to find somebody that's going to fight harder for this community. And the level of respect that we all have is tremendous. I mean, just what I learned from her and going through this process, I'm grateful for that. But I think the context that Alba could provide is, we've had this ordinance in place for quite a while. And we've been missing this regulation. As you all know, we brought this in March of last year. All the other regulations passed and not this. I think Barbara said it even when she was doing her initial comments of, well, we could just do this and we can come back. And I hope that there's enough trust that's been built up between these stakeholders here and the city that we will do just that. If these regulations are not working, or we are finding that the tenant or the property owner is being harmed within these, or that staff can't administer them, we're going to be right back here with you saying this isn't working. But what we have right now is nothing. And what that is leading to is frustration on all sides. And we're trying to help all sides. We're trying to help staff, we're trying to help the property owners, and we're trying to help the tenant by setting the playing field and writing here to know this is what you're supposed to follow. So I think if Alba can kind of speak to how often this is coming up, and again, these regulations have been written to deal with kind of the heartache that we've had during this process, but our ask is, let's compromise and see, and we are going to find more things that are wrong. And we'll come back and we'll fix them.
Yeah.
So Alba, if you can help with that.
Thank you, Ashley.
I absolutely agree with what Ashley's saying. If there's any changes that need to be made, we will be back. It's the same thing with our ordinances as they kind of evolve and as we see. Oh, closer. Sorry. Oh, that one? Okay. Can you hear me better? Okay, hi. So as I was mentioning, I agree with Ashley. If it comes to it in the future, we will be back here with regulations. Same thing with our ordinances as things continue to evolve. Same thing with state legislation, and the city continues to adopt it. Our ordinances, they're not a fixed document. They're an evolving document. And it's the same thing with these regulations. We did pass 3 last year, went to committee, then we went to council and they were approved. But specifically in terms of these, over several months, we did have this discussion with all parties. And it's ultimately to provide clarity. Right now, the landlords come and it's a little bit of a confusing process because it's sort of not necessarily defined, and so it's a lot of open to interpretation based on the hearing officer. And for the tenants, it's confusing too. There's that process of how do I respond, or the owner right away in our current regulations, or non-existent regulations, but our ordinance, the owners have to first mail something to the tenants, and so they freak out and they panic. So it's kind of setting forth something that provides clarity for everyone. But in terms of the numbers, as of right now, since 2022, we've only had 7 fair return petitions submitted. So it's not necessarily a high number, but it's fairly reasonable for a rent stabilization ordinance that's still relatively new. Additionally, 2 of them have come to petition. They've had actual hearings. So those hearing officer through our third party service that we utilize ended up making decisions on those. We had 3 that were canceled. One of those, which Barbara was a part of, was actually a complicated case and involved quite an amount of tenants, and it was in regards to like flooding and having people move back into their homes. So Barbara did assist substantially with that one. And then we have 2 currently that are pending that need to come forth. So this is just to provide clarity, give guidance, and absolutely, if there's anything that needs to be changed or updated, and I try to take into consideration both tenants and landlords' concerns, bring that back up and reach a consensus with all parties.
And Alba, for context on that, how many roughly just rent control, rent stabilization type of complaints have you dealt with in comparison to these 7 regulations on fair rate of return?
So for rent stabilization, we've had a lot more. So usually those are, you mean like rent overcharge complaints?
Brenda, in the housing report that you did last week, you gave a stat of like over 2,000, touch points with community members concerned about rent. I mean, that's really where the bulk of the work is. It's not on this fair rate of return. I agree with Barbara, the mobile home rent is a whole nother beast, and we want to stop that before it ever gets to that. And that's why it's important to get these in place and really work out the kinks. But the bulk of the work that Alba does is related, and that's kind of what I want them to understand.
Yeah, a lot of what we do, especially in the program, is education. It's an educational component for both landlords and tenants. So the data that they're referring to and Ashley is speaking of is our director, Ms. Brenda Lopez, presented last week. We do handle over 2,000 phone calls in last year, the whole last year. And that's just phone calls, walk-ins, emails, and communication. Those, I don't have the exact data in front of me right now, but those did evolve into some citations. And so some of those are rent overcharge complaints, and then some of those are termination notices that were done incorrectly. So that's a lot of the bulk of what we do. But in terms of this specific regulation, which is fair returns, since 2022, there's only been 7. And like I said, it's a smaller amount in comparison to what we handle on a daily basis, because we try to facilitate. And if there is an issue, especially with the rent overcharge complaint, I encourage always people and community to kind of share that information. And we do take those complaints seriously, and we will side and we will work with the owners to rectify those matters before they even get to this point.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Perlo.
I heard Barbara ask a question, and I'm going to ask you. You mentioned the numbers, the big numbers. Barbara asked a question. How does a tenant get notified? How do they get notified? Do they get a letter? They get a phone call?
So
how do we make sure, so we cover ours and yours back, that everybody's getting notified?
Absolutely. So the way it works right now in the current ordinance is that the owners need to mail a copy of the application to the tenants. And that's the biggest issue that we're seeing with this, is typically when the owners mail it, the city still has to go back and forth with these landlords and say, hey, you didn't provide sufficient documentation. And then that's where it gets into a problem, because the tenants saw a partial application. And so on the ones that have been submitted fully, within receipt of everything complete, we typically send out a letter, or that's the process of what would occur once it's fully complete. The one Barbara had, it was a little bit complicated in that specific scenario. Things don't always work. Each is a case-by-case basis. So in that one, the owner did take several months for them to provide the city with all the required documentation. And so that's why we're trying to put these regulations in place in order to put a timeline for staff and also for these landlords. Because if not, they'll drag it out. And it'll take them a few months, and then they'll send something. And during this whole time, tenants are currently living in that state of, when is it coming? When is this increase? I have a petition. I have to take off work. And so we're trying to clear up a lot of uncertainty for all parties. And same thing with the landlord. Sometimes having a deadline, it helps to be able to say, hey, I have about a week to submit this, or I have about 2 weeks. And so if you see in our regulations, the ones we currently propose right now, we will also be mailing out letters once it's fully complete and it's deemed complete. And that's where there is that confusion with the way our ordinance currently stands.
Mr. Rosales, do we need to make a motion to go past 10 o'clock?
The schedule is till 10:15, I believe, so we have a few more minutes.
Okay. I'm sorry.
As a former
Yeah,
mailman,
if it goes past 10:15, there will need to be a motion. Thank you.
I want to make sure the mail service doesn't catch hell on this.
Yeah.
Are we doing a return receipt, or how are we doing this?
So
How are we covering the city?
The way that we've done it for the ones that we've had is we will mail them, and we typically do tracking in them to ensure that they got delivered. And then we still follow up with a phone call. So when a landlord provides his petition, they have to submit the mailing address, their phone number, an email address. So in the one that Barbara was involved, we were doing massive emails to everyone like, hey, it's gonna be this date, or hey, please see the attached documents that were additionally submitted by the landlord. So we try all methods of service just to ensure, everyone's on board, it's equal. I mean, it's complicated, especially when people provide things last minute, so we're just trying to clarify that process.
When we touch base with them, we let them know that this was sent at a certain date.
What was that?
When we touch base with them, however we do it, we let the people know in whatever notice we have that it was sent at a certain date. We haven't heard back from you.
Yeah, well, we typically let them know, yeah, we received a fair return petition and we're gonna be processing, but as it stands right now, we still may need additional documentation from the landlords. So we don't wanna notify and provide everything to the tenants until afterwards, so it's just an easier process for them to kind of follow and not be as confusing as it currently is.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just looking at our agenda, it indicates the meeting scheduled from 8:30 to 10 p.m., so I'll make a motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Perla. Madam Clerk, call for the vote.
Committee Member Bettis?
Yes.
Committee Member Perallo?
Yes.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes,
And this motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
thank you. We'll continue. Ms. Golden, were you going to say something?
I just want to make sure that we were answering the actual question, Councilman Perella, that you had it, because I couldn't tell if your question was who does the mailing, or like, is it the property owner or the city?
Whoever is doing the mailing, they can cover their back, that they can prove they mailed it. Somebody's covering their back, so we don't end up here and people say, I never got it, and then we blame a mailman. And I'm not just sticking up for the mail service, but it's easy to blame somebody else.
So Alba, in the
Costs
draft,
money for return receipts, but sometimes it saves your bacon.
so Alba, in the draft regulation versus what Barbara was asking for in terms of the service. So currently in the draft regulations versus what we do today, I don't know if those two things are the same, but does the city mail something to the tenants, or are you saying it could be mail, it could be provided directly, or it could be emailed?
So right now, the way the city does it is we will send the letter, but it's easier sometimes for emails too, but we'll follow up because not everyone checks their email daily.
So the
and
city
let people
sends
know.
the letter?
After the landlord. So the way
Okay.
it currently stands is per our ordinance, the owner needs to notify the tenants. So when the owner submits it to us, they have to concurrently also provide a notice to this tenant. And so that's where that discretion arises, is did I receive it on time? Did the owner provide it? And so in this, if you look at our actual regulations, it gives those timeframes and it spells it out for the landlord and for the tenant when they should get it, what the process is and what that entails.
Thank you,
I
Ms.
still
Golden.
think the councilman is asking, how do they get it? Do we specify within the draft regulations that what I heard you just say is that the owner has to provide and we follow up, but does it
That's correct.
specify how the owner has to provide it to
They
the tenant?
provide it through mail.
Through mail?
Initially, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Golden, thank you, Ms. Alba.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeanette.
No worries at all. The problem with the service, I think, is that it can really get caught up in legal language. I know that when I send out a disposition, I have 21 days. I walk it into the mailbox or the post office, they date stamp it, I take a picture of it. That's my proof. So we could easily just say, we just need a picture of that postage stamp, because they do it at the Oxnard post office.
Thank you. And we're still on item 2. I heard you say, Barbara, that you're okay with the staff's recommendation, but there is the subsection B, section 101.042F. The hearing officers shall make their decision based only on the oral and written submission and the staff recommendation. And if we can put that, Diego, if you're able to put that back up on the screen for people, so people can see it. The staff's recommendation is requests will not be accepted. This section contains a list of categories that the hearing office or officer can base their decision, and oral testimony of the owner and tenant is already included. Do you want to comment on that, Barbara, or are you okay accepting that rejection by staff?
Let's see, which one
This
are
is,
you
this is
on?
page 20.
See, I don't have
Section
anything by
B.
the
Oh, you
pages. I have it by I just have Exhibit D, and so I refer to the,
We can give you that handout.
Yeah, or if I can intervene, Barbara, it's 1.04F.
1.04F? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just really quickly, it's in paragraph format, but there's four particular methods of evidence, if you will, that the hearing officer can base his hearing off of. And the very first one is just written submissions. So I recommend not putting written and oral submissions because it looks like it might be limiting to only written and oral submissions when we have a bunch of other categories. So
Well,
written
that
submissions
isn't where, what I was suggesting was that it would read, a hearing involving, let's see, both the owner and the tenant, where both the owner and the tenant can only provide, and I said, written and oral statements directly to the hearing officer. And you don't want them to have the ability to give a written statement to the hearing officer. That I don't understand.
No, and that goes with the initial rejection of the reply brief and the SIR reply. So again, the written submissions need to be in before the hearing, and that's in the first category, and then
Yeah,
this second
but you
category.
don't give another opportunity. And I guess the thing is, I really see it as an unfair balance, because you got, puts in their petition, tenant looks at it, does some stuff, says some things, so then they respond to the tenant, then the tenant can't say anything in writing after that. I just find that a little, I just have a problem with that. And
Yeah,
I have a problem
this
with
regulation.
it because we're dealing, it's like, I don't know, I'm not gonna be around forever. I don't know if there's gonna be people representing these tenants. So I'm just thinking in practical terms, based on, years of experience. Some people would say, I want to do everything, I want to speak because I can't write. Others will say, I don't want to say anything, but I'll write it down. So I'm just saying, I just thought both, they should have the availability of both. I understand, I didn't agree with it, but I said, okay, consensus that we're not, going to have a hearing where we can even cross-examine. I gave that up. Okay, that's a big deal. But I'm just trying to make sure that as much fairness for the tenants is there. And some may want to do something in writing, or they're going to say, maybe they got a friend that'll help them, but the friend's not going to come to the hearing. Well, I'll write it for you, okay? And that's, when you're getting help from, pro bono help or whatever,
Yeah.
You get what you can. And I just found it a little disconcerting that they limited it to the oral. That's all. If you got to go with that, you got to go with that. It's not something I'd say, oh, I think that's a great idea, because I don't.
Andrew, is there an issue if at the time of the hearing, if a person presents a written document and is shared with the other party and with the hearing officer at that time?
Well, no, and to Barbara's point, I just want to point out that the section that she's referring to is F, and if you go down to just the very next section, subsection G, it talks about both the landlord and the tenant can testify in a narrative fashion at the hearing. And it seems like that's what Barbara's getting at. That's in the very next subsection.
But that's oral. And I wasn't talking about
Here,
that.
if I can interject really quickly, because I was cut off earlier. Now, if the tenant, and this is pretty common, most people when they go in and they prepare for this, or they have a friend prepare for this, can go in with a written statement, absolutely, and then they can read that written statement right into the record. That would be their oral argument. What we are trying to cut down on here is the written statements and something that's a 30-page in length and extra documents and all sorts of stuff that hasn't been seen. And this particular section it goes to what the ALJ needs to look at in terms of what he bases his decision on. So it's not a limitation. He's looking at their or considering their testimony, their written responses, their replies, the petition, any expert information, or any other relevant public document records, maybe from the city or elsewhere. And so we are, the crux of this is the universe of evidence that the hearing officer needs to base his decision on, and he can't be pulling things, out of his hat. And this keeps it fair so that everybody knows what type of information or evidence he's going to base his decision on. And if he does not have appropriate information, or if he needs something else, these regulations do allow for him to request that from both parties.
Well, the one thing to point out, though, is the one hearing that we did have was supposed to be on Zoom. And so you got all kinds of problems with Zoom. Half the time, it cuts out. So, which that would actually make another reason why. So that, I'm just saying, I think they're overreacting because there may not be, but I'm just saying cover all your bases. And that's all I'm saying.
I think
I think everybody was freaked out by what happened because I got that case late, the day before the case. I turned in a brief and I turned in a spreadsheet that took all of their figures and laid them all out. And everybody was overwhelmed. And then, so what did the lawyer for the other side do? Half an hour before the hearing, he pulled out. But it was an overwhelming lot of stuff. But again, it wasn't like I had the thing for 30 days. I had a week to put together, 5 years of analysis of the documents. It was an extraordinary case. Now, what's going to be most important on these cases going forward, because probably where you're going to see people trying to get rate of fair return are the ones who do all the substantial rehab, okay? And the one thing that is going to be very challenging is we've got an amortization, table. So they're not going to be able to load all of their expenses. And that's what that guy was doing, because after the hearing was over, he filed another petition. I don't know what happened with it. Then he changed his mind. And then he said, I'll take the 4%. But this is very serious stuff, because nobody in our city is paying 30% of their income for rent. And there was one section that he took it out, the pre-1995. I didn't say pre-1995. I just said in terms of what you're going to compare units that are covered under this ordinance. And I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Yeah. And that was in...
That's the one on page
it was
25.
What page was it on?
It's on page 25, section 1.0615.
I'd just like to, if we can, Barbara's just finished on this page 20, and I think Elle was going to say something, and then Mr. Rosso, if you want to come up. No more. Okay, Elle, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just to recap really quickly, and I want the committee to understand the importance of these regulations. Right now, we have nothing. This process has nothing. These guardrails, these protections for tenants, for the city, for the property owners is not here. And so we are squabbling, if you will, over, some very insignificant edits here. And while they may not be insignificant to Barbara, and I understand and I appreciate her, zealous advocacy for the tenants, and that is fabulous. I think we really are doing a disservice to our community members by not getting them something as soon as possible. And this the best we can do? I think at this moment right now, it is, and we give it some time and look and see how it's going to work out. There's been very few of these petitions. These are not, these typically don't come in a deluge and up rents across the city for everybody over and over and over again. This is almost like a one and done. And here we are having a regulatory scheme as to what the, most importantly, what the property owner has to provide to essentially request this. And then we afford a lot of opportunity for the tenants to respond and participate so that they aren't blindsided by a increase that could be greater than 4%. So we appreciate Barbara's requests here. They have already been submitted, and as I'm going through this, and as I read her letter earlier, I think this morning, and going through it and putting the slide together for council, we are now seeing, or I am now seeing at least, tweaks by Barbara in terms of the edits that she wants. They are definitely changing from what is in her letter to where it's getting a little difficult for us to respond to, because we're in a position where written versus oral, it's jumping around in the position that we were told it was in to know it's down here. And so I really don't want us to lose sight of really what we need to do here tonight is we got to get something on the books. Because if we don't pass this tonight, it could be another 3 to 6 months before we get something back to council. And that just is going to further hurt our community for the limited amount of petitions that we do, because these are complicated issues.
I appreciate that insight. Thank you. And if you're okay with it, then Barbara, can we move to number 3, which is on page 25?
Mayor,
Oh, yes, go ahead,
excuse me.
Councilmember.
The young lady in the red, she had her hand up, she's walked up, she's been ignored.
Oh, no, I called her. She said, no, never
But
mind.
she's probably being polite. If you had something you wanted to say, please come up. Because the podium has been operated by Barbara, and she's done a very good job, but you had something you wanted to say?
I did. I was just going to say.
Speak in the microphone, please.
I didn't quite understand what she was saying, because I'm sorry, I don't know your name. He already said that it's in the next paragraph of how to respond, and quite frankly, I don't understand. So the burden of proof, the arduous task, is on the landlord, right? They have to provide the finances, the documentation to be considered for this thing. And it's facts. It's not made up. It's things that have happened. It's solidified. I get that you have to send it to the tenant. They have to be aware of it. They have to respond. And I don't know if I'm naive, but it's yeah, they did those things, or no, they didn't. They said that they put the new roof on, but they really didn't. Or, I mean, in certain things, or I can't, and I get the hardship things, but this is not what that is. This is not rent control. This is not, trying to stipulate the low income things. This is a fair rate of return petition for the landlord to bring things, to kind of recoup some costs. So it doesn't need to go back and forth. The tenant doesn't need to respond to a response. It has to be a case by case. You can't wordsmith it to death. I agree with what everybody's saying. We really need to put something on the books, and we need to work it out. And we sat with Cause. I was part of that. We kind of did the timeline of how things would work. And this ordinance answers a lot of those questions. Is it perfect? No, but it is pretty darn good, and we're pretty comfortable presenting it to the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Perillo. Thank you, Mr. Durazo. So if you're okay with it, Barbara, we'll go to, it's number 3, it's on page 25. The staff recommends rejection of proposed change. And A is section 1.06.1A. Comparables must be units built prior to 1995. Staff
All
recommend.
right, that's what they're rejecting. All
Okay.
I was saying is that what it should read, the level of fair market rents for units comparable to those as to which the petitioner seeks a rent increase. Units are comparable if they are, and I had put covered under the ordinance. I just don't see how you're going to compare. And what is covered under the ordinance is something that's before 1995, and they can come in with a brand new, you know, apartment complex that happens to be in the same neighborhood or similar size. I just didn't think that made sense. I think if you're doing an apples to apples, then they should be covered under the ordinance. Why are you comparing something that's not covered under the ordinance? That's all I was saying. And nobody has given me a good answer as to why there's something wrong with that.
Andrew or El, can you?
We should be able to get you a good answer here tonight.
Yeah, and thank you. Because the point of this is to let the landlord get a fair rate of return. And essentially what you do is if you limit it to certain properties and exclude others, it essentially would create like a loophole. It would create a silent potential cap on the percent. And I know we want to keep our our rents as low as possible, and I definitely appreciate that. But we are trying to avoid invalidating our entire scheme for wordsmithing a section like this. Like the speaker said earlier, this is actually outside of the rent stabilization codes and universe, if you will, and it's looking at one small issue. And so if we are putting untested, unknown, and really unrecognized guardrails on here, when a landlord takes a writ on this over to Superior Court, more than likely we are going to lose, because and there's lots of case law out there, if it shows that the fair rate of return is X, Y, and Z, and he is prevented from getting that one way or another because he wasn't able to use comparable units or there's an artificial cap, the court will overturn it and will either implement the appropriate percentage that was determined at the administrative level, or may direct a new hearing with appropriate evidence and coming to the appropriate percentage. And what that does is it increases costs for everybody all around. We're in Superior Court. The city is over there. We now have to defend our ordinance for a small, a small little 3-word sentence in the regulation that could invalidate the entire scheme. So here, this allows a landlord to look at things just in their neighborhood, determine fair market value. Will that result in higher rents? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But what we can count on is a cut down on legal challenges, a cut down on the invalidation of our process, and allowing the landlord to receive a fair rate of return. And this would be probably his one and only time that he'd be eligible for it, because now he will be at market rate and subject to the cap going forward. So this really is kind of a one-time, a one-shot
so that just
regulation. Mayor, I understood Barbara's thing, but our city attorney seems to make a lot more sense to me as far as answering the question. You may not agree, Barbara.
Yeah, no, I think she hit the nail on the head. She hit the nail on the head. And basically what she's saying is this is a loophole so that those that are in rent control can essentially get out of rent control. And that's, okay, I understand the cities, and I'm not going to argue with you guys. If you don't want to, I've always been a little bit more aggressive in terms of, having to deal with stuff in courts and finding. And I mean, I've heard it. The city's position is, we don't want to take this ordinance to court because we think we're going to lose. So let's get the best we can. And if that's it, that's it. Now, in terms of the two things I put up for both of you, or for the three of you to consider, I really felt those were policy issues. And I think you should deal with them as policy issues. And if she's saying those policy issues will get you into court and therefore we don't want to do it, okay, I hear you. Let's just say I practice law on the street. We're different, you know, it's like I've never had a case where I could walk in and say, we're gonna win this case, because we were always an underdog, we were always a minority, we were always discriminated against. I'm used to that. So, you know, your city attorneys tip around and make sure nothing, you know, you don't get into court, okay, fine, I'll accept that. But I'm not gonna say, I think it's the best ordinance can be, because I don't believe that. Okay, but let's just go with it, because it's obvious this is what you guys are gonna do. Okay, thank you.
I think that gets back to the compromise that we're talking about here. Like the one that we just debated, that was one that wasn't coming from the realtor group. That is something for the city of the risk adverse side that we have for this. We all compromised and agree it could be stronger in some areas. It could probably be pulled back. There's going to be winners and losers on that. True compromise here. And that is what's before you right now. I think you've heard from most speakers, if not all. We're trying to get something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a do or die. We've had the ordinance since 2022 without it, but you can see there's frustrations on all sides with not having it, including the staff side. I mean, again, you heard all the kudos for Alba in this. I mean, she has had to figure this out and work with both sides and compromise throughout the whole thing. This just helps provide those guardrails a bit more. And again, and I think, you know, I said it in the beginning, we'll be back here if it's not working. And state law changes all the time. Cases happen in other cities that we learn from. We just don't really want to be the case that other people are learning from.
Just one question for clarity. I think you mentioned the number of petitions that have come through. Can you clarify what that number is again?
It was 7, but they were of various states.
Okay.
That's correct. So there's been 7. There's been 2 that have been moved forward and have passed successfully. There's 2 that are currently pending, and then 3 that were canceled. One of those being Barbara was a part of.
I think for me, if we're moving to some comments here, is I have a big issue with the 10%. I don't know if there's a way to, if we're looking at page 34, requested policy.
Councilwoman, are you okay if we finish
Yeah.
items 3 and 4, and then we'll get to?
Totally. I can withhold my comments until then.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I hear Barbara's passion, but Ms. Goldman, I think this is a compromise, and we can always come back and revisit if there's some errors here. But Barbara, if we can move to still on item 3, and I think we talked about, I think Councilmember Perello brought up the mailed and serve and the method for informing, and the staff recommendation is the request is rejected because it requires the creation and use of a legal document, which essentially is the proof of service. The purpose of the regulation is to simplify the process and not include legal technicalities that are not required but could result in nullifying final decision dates, creating confusion, accidentally rendering deadlines void. Your party forgets to include proof of service. And I think Jeanette spoke about an alternative, and Albert provided some insight and practice. Are you okay with that? With the practice we have in place now, Barbara?
Well, it was just for clarity. It was just for clarity. It says the low income household shall have 30 days from the date when the hearing officer's decision granting the rent increase is mailed to inform the owner and the city. Now, is it, in terms of the 30 days, should run from when the decision is mailed to the tenant? And so that's why it was unclear to me.
Andrew,
And it's just, I just want to make sure that it's clear that when these things are mailed or whatever, that they're also mailed on the tenants. Because when is that 30 days from when the decision, when do they get the decision? When they get the decision, they should have 30 days. And I just think the language should say that.
Go ahead, Mr. Pearl.
Can our city
For
attorney?
when it's, when I say when it was served on them, you know, is what I had proposed. When it's mailed to the tenant, then if we said mail to the tenant, that's fine, I could live with that. But it's just to, it's that whole, anytime you count a deadline, it's from when and to whom. And that's all, I think it should be, from when the decision is forget served, is mailed on the tenant.
That makes
So
sense.
that's all I'm asking. That's when the 30 days, it starts.
Do any of our city attorneys have a response to that? Because I'm just thinking of this in my mind. If we have, excuse me, El, if we have an issue and we're sending it to multiple parties, and we know we sent it out to the multiple parties, same time, I don't want one of them coming back and saying, you didn't tell me, or I got it late, or the kid ate it, or the dog ate it, or the business going, it got mixed up in my mail, or the mailman delivered the wrong thing. I want everybody on the same boat. I don't want somebody to have I get a special favor because I got it late, and I have to trust that they got it late. And yet if I know my city sent them to the right parties at the same time, same place, in my mind, that's it. I could be wrong, correct me, any of the city attorneys here.
Yeah, Committee Member Perello, now that I'm looking at this, and I wish I had the opportunity to go over this, when I'm looking at this, I'm also wondering if there is a typo in this 1.07.1, because as I'm looking at it here, and because I think when I got the letter from Barbara, the way it was written was confusing. I see how there could be some confusion here when the decision is mailed to inform the owner this. It is mailed to the tenant.
Right.
Okay.
To the tenant.
But it doesn't clearly state that here. And I think that is it's a typo. I think that's an edit that would offer some real clarity here. So I do agree with her in this instance as I'm looking at this. I don't think we need to say served, but we do say mailed to the tenant. Whether or not that got cut off or is a typo, but we absolutely make that clearer. That's a very quick fix.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Sounds good to me. Okay, then we'll move to, it's number 4. This is on page 26. The staff's recommendations to reject the proposed change, sections 1.07, parentheses 4, the city to file with the city any written and served objection to the claim. Staff recommends that this request is rejected based on the same reasoning as stated above.
Well, in number 4, it's the same thing.
So-
That we're leaving out the tenant.
So we'll just include that, and that's a,
It should read, okay, so if the petitioner's gonna have 10 days from the date the tenant made the written claim to both the owner and the city, to file with the city and mail to the tenant, so the tenant knows they're gonna get copy of the objection of the landlord.
Ella, you in agreement?
Does that work?
Yeah,
make that
and
revision?
here's the thing. I think if we included in Barbara's thing mailed and served, it still wouldn't be clear. I think what we need to do is better spell out tenant, petitioner, and who gets what when. So this is a very quick fix. We can absolutely do that. Not a problem.
Wonderful.
And I just wanted to highlight too, that this section that we're talking about, it's only as to the hardship appeal. It's not for all
Right.
of this. So just making that clear.
Thank you, Andrew. So then we'll go to number 5, and this is where the councilwoman has some questions. This is on page 34. This staff recommends rejection of proposed policy change, regulation 1.04.3, requesting a maximum 10% rent cap limit be established. Staff's recommendation, Civil Code Section 1947.12, applies to year-over-year increase for the gross rental rate for a dwelling which has a max cap of 10%. This does not apply to fair rate of return petitions, which are generally requested on a limited basis, not yearly. And it goes on, the requested change mischaracterizes the purpose of the rent cap in sections 1947.12. Case law has held that limits on rent increases must reflect an increase that allows the unit owner a fair rate of return, which a cap will prevent. this type of increase is usually used on a one-time basis. Councilwoman, you had a question on this?
Yeah, I was just curious on your recommendation and the 10%. Yeah, just want to start there, and then I can ask my
Okay.
second question based
My
off.
logic was, if state law says the highest increase that anybody can get is 10%, then it would seem that the same would apply. Now, your attorneys are saying, well, this is a whole different thing, doesn't apply. That's debatable, but that's not what I'm gonna win with these attorneys, okay? Because they don't wanna risk. So I will withdraw that, with the understanding that I'm not agreeing to it, but it's part of what, that's what I'm hearing all night. Because, see, basically what she was saying is to get them up to market rate. That's what she's saying. But we put in a rent control in 2022, so that it wasn't intended for people to get up to the market rate. So all I was saying, and now that I've heard this, I'm absolutely correct, but I totally get why we're not gonna make the change, or you're not gonna make the change. But it is a vehicle for landlords to get around our 4% and get up to the market.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think, I'm curious about the flexibility of that number of the 10%. And yeah, those are my comments there.
Elle or Andrew, would you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, as we previously stated, that 10%, it's a completely different section from our rent control ordinance. So we have the 4% that applies for, what the city council has previously passed for rent control. But here, the 10% that Barbara is talking about is specifically under the Tenant Protection Act, under Civil Code Section 1947.12. It applies year over year. They're two separate things.
I think that's the distinction that we're not making. I feel like we're talking past Barbara's point a little bit, but that last part that Andrew just said is the important part. The year over year versus a one-time. I think there's still like this lack of understanding about when and how a fair rate of return comes up versus an annual increase. And I think Barbara's part of her concern is, well, won't they just keep coming back for a fair rate of return every year and get around this? Because that is a way that you can get above the 10% cap. But as this regulation shows, and I think one of the others said it, the burden of proof that they aren't getting a fair rate of return is not the same thing as getting to market rate per se, and they are regulated by different parts. So, Andrew, that last part I thought that you said was very important. Will you kind of explain those two annual increases versus the fair rate of return and the burden of proof that they're going through? It's based on specific documentation that they have to provide, not just, I can go up to 4% this year, I can go up to 4% this year.
Well, yeah, and so under the Tenant Protection Act, for that 10% cap, that's year over year, whereas here for, the whole reason for us bringing this is so that it solidifies our process for a landlord to be able to bring a fair rate of return that they're bringing. It's not like an automatic thing.
Is there a common understanding here about what a fair rate of return is? I feel like somehow we're missing that part of what is a fair rate of return versus just a rent increase.
So here,
Ashley, if I can
go ahead.
Jump in. Yeah, thank you. And I apologize because I think this is my fault in debating back and forth with Barbara on the 1995 pre and post section in terms of looking at the fair market value of the area. I was using that term loosely and incorrectly, because the fair rate of return is not to bring the property up to the fair market value in the area. You have to look at the property, several other factors, the expenses. There's a really complicated formula that goes into it that our hearing officer is very good at applying. And then he will determine what the true fair rate of return is that will basically cover the property owner's ability to run and maintain the property. So it's not like you would have an $800 a month gross rent going up to $4,000, which may be market for the area. He will probably, or that property owner you may see a couple $100 increase, and that works out to be a fair rate of return for that property based on his particular circumstances. So I do apologize if I interjected a lot of confusion there with the term fair market value. That's just limited to looking at other property values in the area as one small element in determining what a fair return on their investment would be.
So could that number be reduced? I mean, 10 is the wall, right? The 10% is the wall. So, I mean, perhaps maybe you can share a little bit of insight on what other cities, because I did a little quick research, 7%, there's a variety of different ranges, and just curious how the 10%, since it's the maximum.
Well, the 10% is state law. So, and the state law creates like the Tenant Protection Act, like Andrew was saying, and in it, it gives like a really detailed formula as to how owners can calculate just a regular yearly rent increase. They can increase the rent twice a year based on a limited number of factors. CPI is one of them, a cost of living adjustment. But when they come out through that formula, if the stated upon rent increase is 17%, okay, for just a regular increase, we're not talking fair rate of return. The state has said, no, that's too high. If it goes over 10%, that's the maximum that they can get for that particular year. And then when they want to increase it again next year, they got to go through that formulaic process again to see what percent they are at. Now, we as a city set our year-over-year cap much lower than the state did, and there is a pretty wide variety. I think between 4 and 7 is kind of what I would say the sweet spot for maybe the 15 to 19 cities that have a tenant protection ordinance such as ours. So we're definitely at the lower end, but there's a lot of other cities that are at 4% as well.
So Councilwoman, is that clear that that's on two different things again, though? So the rent stabilization, we're on the low, we capped
Right,
it
the
lower, and then the
4%,
fair rate
right.
of return, are you saying that in your research, you're finding cities that are capping fair
For the
rate of
fair
return?
rate of return.
So, Ellen, that's in the debate that we had with the group and what you're talking about. So I think she's trying to ask about caps specific to the fair rate of return.
Right, on the lower ladder of the percentage scale.
Yeah, I haven't seen any caps on fair rate of returns. I'm not saying that there are not any on there, but that's not something that I've seen in their regulatory schemes. Now, I haven't looked at every city's fair rate of return process. So is there a cap possible? Maybe. I'm not aware of one at this time, but we could definitely look into it further. And even if other cities have a cap like that, it's one of those things where you can have it until someone challenges it. I don't know what the state of any type of litigation would be to that type of challenge, but what I can tell you is it would probably work its way through the court system over a matter of several years.
Right, yeah. In terms of that 1947.12, what it says on the rent, it says you could do 5% a year plus cost of living up to 10%. The very first year that came out, we applied it and we were at 10% because the cost of living was over 5% for a few years, and especially in other jurisdictions, that I work with that don't have rent control. But that's all that is. My argument is a very simple one, which I guess is discounted, but if there's a state law, it says in the state of California you can only do up to 10%, then how can we justify doing more than 10%? Or on the flip side, I said that's how we justify a 10% cap. That's all. That was my argument. That's how you justify a 10% cap on the rate of return, because the state law says 10% is all you could do.
Mr. Rosser, go ahead.
So I just want to reiterate that she's talking about the rent caps that the state and the cities and the, you know, specific ordinances have. This is fair rate of return. The state does not have a cap on fair rate of return. So it's two separate issues. That's rent. She's talking about rent. This is fair rate of return, has nothing to do with that. So I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
And fair rate of return was something that was created as a constitutional protection against the takings. Okay? When you go into court on a fair rate of return, what they're looking at is a takings case, because that's how the landlord would win. Again, on that one, I'd say, how could you say it's a takings when the state says 10% is all you could do? But again, I'm going to leave it there because your lawyers aren't going to let you do it anyway. Okay? So we don't need to belabor this. And we'll see. And it's really going to depend on what happens with the cost of living from here on out, because, you know, pretty soon it'll wipe out the entire ordinance. And that's my concern on the long range.
Yeah, and just to clarify for the public, my comment was about the fair rate of return and the percentage. And so it was clarifying that there's currently no cap. And so, yeah, and I think this was helpful as well, Barbara. So I thank you for your comments too.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. So then we'll go to, if we're okay with that, we'll go to number 6. This is the last contested item. This is on page 39. The staff's recommendation is a rejection of proposed policy change, Regulation 1.07.5, requesting for rent increases to be limited to less or under 50%.
They've mischaracterized totally what I said. Okay?
Okay.
That has nothing to do with the rent increase being limited. All I'm saying in that, if you read the letter, is that when a low-income person is making their claim to the city to get a break because of hardship, I'm saying that if their rent is 50% or more than their income, then you say, okay, I will accept that as that's the standard. That's all. Rather than going through all these proof things, because hey, if they're paying more than 50% of their rent, or 50% of their income for rent, they do have a substantial hardship that everybody knows. That's why we're in so much trouble, because so many people are in that position. But that's all I was saying. It's a given, so why go through the whole 9 yards? It's very easy, okay, this is the rent, this is, here are your paychecks. Do the math.
Right.
That was all. Just trying to make your jobs a little easier, but that's not so easy.
Thank you.
One of the, Mayor, one of the issues, Barbara brings up a good point, but she used an excellent point. Just show us the paychecks. We all, unless we are hiding under a rock, we all know there are a lot of people that make cash under the table and they don't report it. And that's an abuse on one side. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Andrew, were you going to say something?
Sorry. No, I was just discussing with Alba, if looking at this differently, a landlord is not, they can't subsidize the tenant's rent. This was put in here specifically so that it was only for individuals that had this hardship. So there has to be a point, and this is what, again, to come to a compromise. This is what we compromised at.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alba.
I did want to interject too as well. Typically what we've seen or what has been seen with some of these administrative hearings, not ours specifically, but also other jurisdictions, is when there's a hardship, they'll either gradually do a rent increase or they spread them out over like a fixed term, whether it may be years. in order to get them up. So it's not right away something where the rent goes up drastically from one month to another. There's typically a time frame that's involved. So that's part of this hardship appeal, so that, you know, that can be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Alba. El, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, and I can see how the 6A, what the staff wrote there about Barbara's thing is a little confusing. But I think if you look at the recommendation is correct. And I think, you know, Barbara trying to, you know, make the process a little easier by having an evidentiary presumption. It's basically, if they hit this, then the landlord has to overcome that evidence. And I think here, it's not the landlord's job to prove whether or not they have a severe economic hardship. It lays it out pretty clearly what is in there, and if they submit it, they'll very quickly know if they're over the 50% or over a percentage where they need to adjust this back down or stabilize it or build it out over a series of months or years. That is all in here, and we have everything that is required to protect a tenant from a severe economic hardship. I would prefer to have the onus be on the tenant to at least submit their documents, which are then reviewed, and then we have a factual determination based upon the information that has been submitted by the tenant, and that protects everybody's due process rights and is less likely to be attacked by the landlord on a writ because the client has met their burden of proof essentially, and the landlord will have a difficult time attacking that to overcome the claim of severe economic hardship. So while Barbara's looking at expediency, and, you know, I'm definitely sympathetic to somebody paying over 50% of their income for rent. I mean, that's more the norm today. We definitely want to make sure that the tenants are submitting their claims, getting everything in, and that their severe economic hardship package, if you will, is as defensible as possible. And I think if we get into these evidentiary presumptions and burden shifts, that's where you really can get into the weeds on a writ as to whether or not the presumption was met, the burden appropriately shifted, and then we could get stuck in a loop of appeals and back down administrative hearings and other decisions. And what has happened is we haven't really created a scheme that has protected either party and given them some consistency and the ability to forecast for the future.
Thank you, Al. Any other comments? No? I certainly praise the work of staff and, I'm sorry, oh yeah, come on up. Maria? Yeah.
Sorry, just one more comment, y'all.
Sure.
So good evening, everyone, and council members, staff, and everyone who's here. For clarity, I'm here, communicating here as a representative of CAUSE and not necessarily Barbara's apprentice. So just wanted to say, because we've been silent the whole time, CAUSE appreciates and, you know, commends the work for the city, especially in just thoroughly going through these workshops and going through the regulations, connecting with different stakeholders, and really modeling what this collaborative workshop model could look like, especially in other cities. So hopefully other cities are looking at this as an example as well. Today, as you saw in the back, a majority of our adult committee was present in this meeting, and they were genuinely excited to engage with the content. However, it soon became evident that the topics that we have touched on have been both very impactful and are both very impactful to the tenant community, but are also very complex. And these regulations will have long-lasting impacts in our community and the tenant community. So the points that Barbara has brought up tonight are not trivial, right? Considering the fact that these points will create real impacts on the tenants for years to come. However, the workshop has touched on, again, very technical language, going from constitutional theories of takings clause to state law, right? And so what I wanted to say today is that although the tenants were here, I feel like it felt a little bit out of reach for them having these conversations, right? So just giving that feedback. And because we are, as cause, we work with the committee. The committee is the one that gives us their opinions, and we're the ones that represent them here in the podium. I can't speak out of my own opinions, whether I have them, whether I agree or disagree with, section 1.06 or 1.07. I can't say that without necessarily going back to them. And given that a lot of this conversation happened between yesterday when Barbara submitted her comments and today when we're now in real time seeing what staff has ruled on the comments, I think for us is a little, we don't want to say that we agree and we don't want to say that we disagree. We still have to talk about it is what we're trying to say. And so we welcome the committee at some point to come talk to us as well, staff as well, so that the tenants feel more comfortable with the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I'm just really happy with this council, with my colleagues here, for giving direction to staff to be solutions-based and to be proactive in engaging with our stakeholders. That's what we're about. So I'm just really happy with my colleagues up here and really praise staff and Barbara, your passion, and Maria, and certainly yours, Don, and Jeanette's for participating, and Ellen, Andrew, and Alba, and our housing director is here. This is a collaboration, a compromise to try to put together the best policy for our residents. And to Ms. Goldman's point, I think if there are some shortcomings or areas that we need to adjust and fix, and we'll come back and we'll do it. But at least we've got some parameters. We've got something to work on as opposed to just pushing it further down. And I'm so glad to have you here, Barbara, in our community to provide that expertise and your passion that ultimately you're defending our community. So thank you for your input. I'll take any other comments, or at this point, I don't know what the pleasure of council
Well,
is.
just the one comment, the last speaker, she used the words, quote, long-lasting impact. The mayor said it perfectly. As Ms. Golden has said, it'll be paying attention. If something's got to be tweaked, to bring it back. So I just wanted to make that. I appreciate all the comments. It's obvious there's a tremendous amount of passion in the room.
I too want to highlight that long-lasting impact. And sometimes with a long-lasting impact, there can be more harm done than good. And so considering the demographics of people that I represent, I have to make decisions that are going to ensure that their voices are represented in these types of decisions, because those long-term impacts impact their lives. I mean, we look at the conditions that folks are living in, and it's not universal, but recognizing that there are many pillars and variables to the cost of living. I know we wanted to highlight the difference between the rent control cap versus the fair rate of return, but they still definitely have an impact on the constituency base here in the community. And considering there's, just to be transparent, there's many folks that are struggling to meet the cost of living. That $100 to $200 to $300 increase is something that can determine whether folks can put food on the table. And so I would like to think that landlords in our community in the city of Oxnard understand what the demographics of this community are and are going to put that at front and center when it comes to what conditions and economic brackets of the communities that we serve. And so I will be voting no on this item tonight.
Thank you, Councilwoman. What is the pleasure of council on this item?
Councilman Perez, can you explain why you're going to be voting no? I heard your speech, but why are you voting no? And if you don't want to answer, I may be out of line asking that, but
I think that there's still opportunity to gather more. I know we want to put safeguards in place. I understand that both from the landlord and tenant perspective, we need to have something in writing, but I think we have to do more, and considering the number of petitions that have been submitted in the past, I think 7 was mentioned, right? I think there's definitely just more to be done in terms of research and investigation and what other cities have done, and making sure that some of our additional questions that may have come up from tonight are addressed.
Barbara, what is your
Thank you.
feeling having this discussion here tonight? As a defender of our community and tenants, do you think we need to go back and
And I
engage in
think
more
it's
dialogue?
important that you pass something, okay? You're not gonna pass what I would prefer, that I think would help the people more. And I really, really am worried about end runs around our rent control, or around the 4%. I'm really worried about that because the cost of living is just going up so much. But it is important to have some procedures. When we went to the other hearing, there was no procedures. I wasn't sure what was going to go on. I think the procedural stuff that we've done is very good because it is a roadmap when you're in the hearing. Right. And I think that's worth it. And there was a lot of time invested and a lot of people involved. It's not a perfect product, and it's a dangerous product. But at the same time, without any guidelines, it's already a dangerous product. We don't know what's going to happen. So we'll take our chances if we take you at your word that if we start getting these and we see that it is, using it as an end run because of that 100% of this and that. When I do the math, and I've been asking this question since day one when we had our first meeting, is would somebody explain to me how this actually works? In terms of what actually happens, because I have that hesitancy because I haven't seen it. And I just read it and think, well, I could do this, this, and this would be trouble. That's why I'm concerned about it. But I think it's better to have a procedure than not, okay? Because you have to have some guidelines for your hearing officer and for everybody. And then the big question is going to be, well, if it goes off the tracks, are we going to be able to get it on the tracks? Back on the tracks. That's the challenge. It's always the challenge. But I wouldn't defer, because as long, I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but your lawyers are never going to agree to what I'm proposing because they are doing a risk adverse analysis, okay? Where I am doing a constitutional analysis where I don't think they could find it unconstitutional. I don't think so. But that's two lawyers on different sides of the street that have different opinions. But I think you really are gonna have to defer to your lawyers. And then I'm gonna rely on you for your good faith. If we go through some of these hearings and we find, oh my God, this is the increase they got, then we got to get back. And, I've been burned a couple of times on inclusionary. We're still working. We're still waiting on it. Okay. So, I'm no babe in the woods here, but, that is, we're just going to have to roll the dice. And it's like, the city's got the dice, so you called it up. Okay, I did. I gave it my best shot. Now we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. But I just don't know. The math just doesn't seem to support that. But it is what it is. So let's go for it, see what happens. We'll say it was a consensus, or some things we agreed with, some we didn't, but this is better than nothing, so pass it. That's the message to give to the council. Let the council pass it, and then let's see what happens in reality. The one thing for it, the advantage is there's a lot of stuff that the owner has to provide in order to make the
Correct.
petition. That's the best defense we have. Okay?
Thanks, Barbara.
You know, it's maybe, oh, shoot, I don't want to do all of this, I'll just take my 4%. It's just like, that's what happened at Brookside. He was all hot to get in again, but at the end of the day, he said, well, I'll just take my 4%. Why he did that, I have no idea. But, you know, let's hope that that's the way they play. If they play the game that way, we won't have many problems. We'll see, I don't know. You have fair rate of return petitions that are sitting around waiting? Two.
Thank you.
So, you know, so we'll have two, and we'll find out how it goes.
And Albert, just to
But
clarify,
it's important to have
something.
the regs down when these two are processed.
And Albert, just to clarify, we've had 7 in what time frame?
So from 2022 until current, it's been 7.
Okay.
And typically that's fairly common, especially in rent stabilized jurisdictions, because prior to that, they would have been able to raise what would have been state regulations. And then prior to 2020, there was no rent caps. So that passed through AB 1482. When that was adopted, the state had their civil code and then the city upon adopting ours. So it's kind of around the time frame where you start to see an influx of more people, because now we're going on 4 years soon in June, so that there may be coming more. And then Andrew had something he wanted to say and he wanted to pick
Yes,
it
sir.
up.
Yeah, so just to add to what Barbara was getting at, because as it stands currently, there are no regulations. Without these regulations, for instance, what we talked about for the hardship appeal, there's no way for us to do that currently. This would need to move forward to even have that option.
Correct. Thank you.
And that's what I wanted to share. As of right now, as it stands, there is no hardship appeal. So should an owner move forward, should it be granted, and they do the MNOI formula, it's called maintenance of net operating income formula. That's pretty standard in these fair return petition cases. Then at that point, the tenant would not have that avenue to utilize and say this is an economic hardship. It would be based on what the hearing officer's decision is of how to implement it, what that pertains to, because there is no such regulations as we currently stand. So I just wanted to share that with the committee.
Thank you. I don't know if Don or Jeanette, you have any last comments?
So I think we've made it pretty apparent that we agree with what staff is saying. The alternative to not passing this, the alternative to waiting the next year or so, we are already seeing as property managers, people leaving Oxnard, people taking when units are vacated, they're not going back onto the market. There is a huge possibility, so to your constituents, at least we have an option. It's not going to be widely used because it is arduous for the landlords to provide this documentation. And even if they do, it's a windfall for the community, for the tenant, because that means they're putting money back into the house. So it's a win-win. And to not have this, at least this back, and it's not necessarily that they're going to get a lot of money. If they're already, I mean, you do have to have faith in your landlords and know they're in this community for a reason. Not because they want to, make millions and double their rents. They can go somewhere else to do that, very close. So they are going to do things that will increase the value, that will help the tenants' livelihood and do things. It's an incentive for people to bring up their properties. So I would encourage you to pass this on.
Thank you, Mr. Razzo.
With respect to the tweaks on the 6 points that
Yes, sir.
pretty much we've agreed on, are they going to be included in this item?
If we make that motion.
We separated them?
The ones that I'm sorry, Bert.
Before we do vote, if we are going to include them, I'd like them read into the record exactly which of the tweaks we're going to include.
So for that, the ones that the staff recommended were the typos on page 32 and 33. And then during the review of Barbara's request on section, I think it was, where did I write down that page? I'm sorry.
It's
107. 1.07. Do you have the page number there, Elle?
It's on
Page
page
25.
25.
Page 25. We don't have the red line version of that, but in L's reading of that, we need to go back and make it clear when it's talking about the tenant. So there will be additional changes to section 1.07 if you move this forward to the council, as well as the typos on page 32 and 33 were what I heard. If Barbara could see my face, that Barbara kind of gave up on and agreed that we could just move forward with those ones for now.
That's right. Yeah, I think there were like 4.
And I think it was page
Went
26
from
as
2 to
well.
4.
Within section 107, there'll be multiple changes. So that in 107, what I heard Elle say is in reading through it, she needs to go through and make it clear when it's the tenant or not. So it's not necessarily just 107.4 that Barbara first raised. We need to read that in totality and add tenant where appropriate.
And Elle is nodding her head, yes.
And then there's one last one, the amortization section.
The formatting.
Yes, the formatting, starting on page 21, and that goes a couple pages where we'll have to format. I know I only brought up the glass portion, but there's a couple of them where we just have to move them over.
On the Exhibit D, correct? Like where you
Yes,
highlighted
correct.
glass, for example, needs to be off to the left.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Councilman Perrella, we'll try to do that one more time. Page 25, section 107 will have a few changes when it comes to council reflecting the appropriate, when we're talking about the tenant. Page 21, within the exhibit for the amortization schedule, it's not changing any of the numbers or any of the words, but the formatting, so it's clear if the text is what we would say wrapped. And then there were typos on pages 32 and 33 within section 4A and section 1.04.
Councilmember Pereira, with those
That's-
revisions, are you comfortable making a motion?
Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to make the motion, Mayor.
I can move it forward if I can.
I'll
have you
I'll make the motion.
Okay, then I will second the motion. Any other comments, Councilwoman, or anything?
No, I know that this will be coming back to council if it should pass tonight, and want to just open the availability up to have conversations, further discussions with community members before that final decision is made.
Just, and I agree with you, tonight, it may have been awkward, but the people that left, having worked on a farm, I understand a lot of the people in the back were probably agricultural workers, and they got to get up and go to work. Next time, if this happens and they're same constituents, and they're number one on the agenda, they go number one.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah. Madam Clerk, call for the vote.
Committee Member Perallo,
Yes.
Committee Member Bettis,
Yes.
Chair MacArthur,
Yes.
and this motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. And seeing no further business on the agenda, and without objection, yes, sir, go ahead, Councilmember.
I have a suggestion for a future item on agendas. On the last 2 or 3 days, I have personally been involved where I may not have been in the intersection when somebody blew through a red light or blew through a stop sign. But I think our city needs to take a good look. Do we start getting some cameras? It's not going to stop the person going through the red light or stop sign, but we're going to find out who it is and possibly impact some people to drive a little better. Today coming to this meeting and yesterday, by the grace of God, 2 people didn't have a real serious problem.
And just lastly, Dana and Jeanette, thank you for your comments regarding our efforts to beautify our city, because we're working hard to make it look pretty and better. So thank you for recognizing that and acknowledging it. So without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.